Still on and nothing ever happens? Yeah, I am. Yila's Instagram story. Female pilot who participated in the attack on Iran. Israeli women heroes. Oh yeah, you can't never... They can't push their luck too far on this. Israel can't really... or unless you're like an Israeli, you can never celebrate any kind of military success or whatever, because every single military attack that Israel does is always going to be bad on every single person, so... Doesn't Iran have cruise missiles? Those are pretty targeted. My guess is if they do, they're probably limited in number. And I think the only way Iran can overcome the Israeli air defenses is to overwhelm it. So they don't have like thousands of cruise missiles they can send. I think those are usually pretty expensive, no? I've always been a supporter of Hila and Ethan in the podcast. I know they don't mean harm in the way they intend to say things about Iran, but just as passionate as I feel to be an Israeli, I feel as an Iranian. The Iranian government is absolute dog, and the mullahs that run it are diabolical tyrants, and I agree with them. The most Iranians hate their own government, but don't forget that a lot of us still have family there, just as you do in Israel. We went 2 nights without hearing from our family members, not knowing if they're okay or not, because the internet has been cut there. So I'm not sure if the best words to call one of the pilots who carried out the attacks is a hero, because I will not say the same for the Iranian... This is retarded. I don't know. Whatever. Don't know. I don't know. I don't care. I don't care about any of this. Okay. Hila apologized. I would like to apologize for the recent story I reshare about the female Israeli pilot being a hero. It came off as glorifying violence. You could never celebrate any military success ever based. Steelman for Iran getting nukes. If they get nukes and start nuking everybody, we don't have to hear shit about the Middle East anymore. So you don't believe the war between the Islamic Republic of Iran and Israel is a religious war? If I had 65 IQ, I would believe that.
Right.
Someone noticed a rifle in the backpack of the Salt Lake City shooting suspect and prevents tragedy. Who was there another shooting or something, or what? Did I not hear about this 2 hours ago?
Yeah, we're not fucking. It's a rifle right here.
Hey! Right there.
What? Did this guy start shooting someone, or what? They say shooting suspect. Shots were fired late last evening at a protest at Salt Lake City. Oh, damn. He shot and killed one guy and then ran away to hide in the crowd. During the protest, a guy in all black had fired at least 3 rounds, with one hitting a guy in the head, killing him. A civilian fired back at the shooter in like crowds of people. Are there videos of this? Seemingly grazing him at least, but the shooter ran into the crowd to get away. The people in this video were hiding because the cops were on the hunt for the shooter. The badass in this video saw a bag with a rifle in it where these guys were hiding, with the dude in all black beside it, seemingly trying to blend in with the crowd. He casually walked up to grab it before the guy even noticed. He calls the cops over, who were already hunting for the suspect. The guy who grabbed the rifle bag also yells that he has blood on his hands, and we see images later. The guy seen here does have a bloody injury on his back. That's a good indication he was the shooter and not just a random protester packing heat. Damn. Damn.
Yeah, we're not fucking. It's a rifle right here. Yeah, we're not. Yeah, we're. Yeah,
Oh, so this guy just grabs the dude's bag with the rifle in it?
Hey, right there. This guy, I just grabbed this from this guy. He's right there.
Jesus.
Get on the ground.
Thoughts on open carry at protests? It's fucking... I hate open carry, so I don't know. What do you want me to say? Jesus, bro, what are you doing? So stupid. Please just remember these and keep these as examples. Fuck. I need a tweet to make fun of Ashley Babbitt today. It's so predictable, too. This was today. Nightmare on Walt Street? I think it's like an okayly funny tweet. But these people get so fucking ass-pained when you say anything about any of the deaths on their side. Like, they get so ass-pained. A sitting U.S. senator. Don't know anything about guns, never lived in a place where they're common. What's wrong with open carry? Genuine question. Personally, I feel like if firearms are involved, you want everybody to kind of be like chill and calm. So when people open carry, I think even in America, seeing a gun just makes people nervous. So it makes everybody a little bit more tweaky. And then you lose like your whole strategic advantage of having a firearm if everybody can fucking see it on you. And it's just stupid. People could grab it. I just think it does. This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way. I love, too, how conservatives are. Walz urges Democrats to be a little meaner and bully the shit out of Trump. Wow. Wow. Did Walz really say that? He urges Democrats to be a little meaner. Oh, my God. But isn't concealed carry scary? What do you mean? It's concealed. No one knows you have it. What are you talking about? Comrades now confirming the No Kings organizers across different chapters have called cops on their own and used the cops C*PS to solve conflicts. The same org telling y'all to show up to a nationwide protest only using USA flags. Insert shockedpikachu.jpg. Oh no. He mad.
The alien riots. We're gonna know.
I can't believe you.
We gotta know. We gotta know.
Yesterday, I could have punched all of you in the car.
Why? Because I was right?
Felix!
Because you were wrong. You were wrong.
Felix, you don't put soldiers in your own country. Ever.
Oh, they go to other countries instead.
You can do that. You don't put soldiers. That's why it's called National Guard. Hey, when I was a kid, what was it? September or May? No, May.
So what do you do then?
1970. National Guard shows up. They shoot all these kids in college.
Okay. But I gotta ask though. If I lived in LA, right, and I was driving to work and people were blocking the highway, what about that? What about that?
You'd be pretty pissed off.
I'd be pretty pissed off. So what happens when you can't control that anymore?
So how do you protest?
Oh, you do a peaceful demonstration, right? Where you voice your opinion in respectful, civil ways, and you use all of your rights.
Like January 6th.
True. January 6th, it was a disaster.
Okay.
That's the range of scenario. It's not like whether or not they were dug in, opposed versus intimately involved. There's a little bit of like gray, like wiggle room, flexibility within that space. And I think you're right, Scott, that that President Trump, like most leaders around the world, likes success and want to be associated with success and strength and daring.
100%.
And I've personally heard President Trump, for instance, be critical of Israel after October 7th, soon after October 7th, where he thought Israel looked like a paper tiger, and they did. And at the same time, I've heard him marvel at what Israel accomplished with the pager attack and completely change his view. And I think there's a tendency, and I see this a lot in.
Well, hi, what's up?
Hello?
Hi,
Can
how's
you
it
hear
going?
me?
Yeah.
I'm not using my microphone, so it might sound shit. Sorry about that.
No, it sounds
But it's been a while. Things happened since then.
Indeed.
Or are you fully in the nothing happens camp?
With Iran and Israel?
Yeah, I am actually, but just
Oh.
wanted your opinion.
Yeah, no, I don't think. I think it'll be like last time. But I could also be wrong.
Yeah, a bit of smashing back and forth, perhaps, but with Ukrainians are super cheerful, obviously, because getting Iran smacked is just comfort. It's comforting. People enjoy that shit, but other than that, it's just that even if they bomb like a fuck ton of like the Shahed producing factories, and also I heard they nuked the guy who was one who signed up the deal with Russia in 22 for giving them Shahed drones. So as someone who's like daily bombed by Shahed drones, I appreciate that he's dead. But not going to help us that much, honestly, because most of their shit has been in Russia in like a year already, like Geran, things like that. They're basically Shaheds, but like Russia made. And also they make them in North Korea. So really doesn't help, honestly, like at least from what experts I heard say.
Yeah.
But just watching that shit burn is quite pleasant, not going to lie. So there's that. But no World War III, I think, again. So I don't know. Yeah. How do you rate our spiderweb operation?
I thought it was pretty good. I give it a 8.5 out of 10.
You couldn't give it a 10.
Well, yeah, it's not like you won the war with it. Listen, when Putin, I'm just kidding, not Putin, but like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It is good though. Let's all agree. Like 34% of strategic bombers is pretty fucking good.
All right, really cost effective, long-term operation, shows good special operations, logistics planning, technological savvy, cost effectiveness. Yeah, it was a good operation from top to bottom for sure, 100%. Yeah.
A bunch of extremely intelligent people in the West, in particular in the United States, called it a terrorist attack. So
yeah, every single thing that
I'm down
anybody
on
in the
this.
West does is always a terrorist attack. And then when the other side does it, it's always understandable. So that's just don't like it. You got to block the lefties.
Yeah.
Okay, just stop. Just block the lefties. Yeah.
I am trying. Okay, I am trying, but it's not just lefties. There was like a MAGA people as well. I can block half the country. Okay, so it's just a little bit difficult. But yeah, there was like a bunch of funny shit. People were like, oh, that's like a terrorist attack, and you're like, why? And like also like I understand like with Israel sometimes they talk about like people being killed, civilians and things like that, but in this case even that didn't happen. There was like a bunch of dudes that got exploded by walking in a car, one of the trucks, basically. I don't know why the fuck they went in, like Russian dudes.
Yeah.
But they exploded, but it's like the least amount of casualties possible with the maximum amount of incredibly epic damage to bombers that were already loaded, by the way.
Yeah, I
for
saw
the
that.
attack.
There's a Peruvian video on it. And
Oh,
some
yeah,
of them already
for
had
the
like, missiles and everything on them, yeah.
Yeah, so they were like about to go on a big bomb in, Mamba Jamba in the night, as per usual. So that was very, very, very good. Everyone got like celebrated, shit faced, all the classic. But then we got like 56 explosions in Kharkiv. I mean, which I kind of expected, that they will, throw a temper tantrum of some sort, obviously. But 56 in 2 hours. Like, that's a lot, even by my standards. I was like, in the corridor just basically from 3 to 5, from, to 5 until the morning, and like 56 explosions. Cobs, like guide bombs, drones, ballistics, all at the same time. I couldn't even understand like where the fuck is everything exploding. I usually can tell, but this time it was so much that I couldn't tell. Like it just felt like everything was on fire.
Yeah.
And pretty nasty. And the next day, they are also, by the way, just a fun fact, like 40 drones flew directly above my place. I had one.
Like you can see it on like a
was,
flight tracker, or you
great.
just like hear them going over, or?
I hear them.
Oh, okay.
Hear them like go over, yeah. And they didn't do this like motion when they do this like piqué. I don't know how it's called exactly in English, but they're like do this like dive basically, and then they explode.
Okay.
And this dive is a very particular sound, pretty loud. And I was like legitimately like I very, very, very terrified. But then I was like, I feel absolutely nothing. This point after the like 20th one, I can't even be scared because I'm so like stupefied basically but by the amount of like explosions that my brain like went moosh. I just looked at the wall the entire time. Like the capacity to be terrified, I guess, is only can last for so long before you're kind of like numb.
Yeah.
So that was not fun.
Trauma and PTSD will eventually set in. I mean, not the best thing, but yeah,
Yes.
geez.
You think? I don't know actually. Like I'm like adamant that I don't have it, but I might be wrong. I don't know. So I'm like I'm functioning very well, so I can't complain. About the it doesn't really like impair anything I'm doing.
Sure.
So in that sense, I can't really complain that much. I'm feeling pretty good, but sometimes like things just get rough. Obviously, plus sleeping like is pretty impossible because I'm just like my brain just refuses to be. I don't know. There's just some stupid thing. Like I can't really. I'm like afraid to die like while I'm asleep. So I don't know like why, because technically like being conscious when you're be bombed and being like asleep technically doesn't really matter. You like will still die. I mean, if it like hits directly your apartment, but just something about it, like not having like any control because I'm asleep, is just very, I don't know, it's like difficult because of that. I'm not like afraid when I'm not sleeping, but I'm like super duper afraid to fall asleep and then get bombed. I don't know. That's wild. Most people just sleep through it. So It's not like every Ukrainian is insomnia bane like me. Yeah, that's kind of the news, I guess.
Damn. Hopefully, I don't really know what to say. Hopefully, I have no hope for anything on this planet right now. But I mean, hopefully there's more Russian planes getting bombed, and hopefully we are. I mean, like maybe there was this world that I said like a year and a half ago where if Ukrainian SBU's deepfake Putin, saying Trump is a small dick, maybe Trump would turn. it is kind of funny that Trump is starting to get, although I guess it goes back and forth a little bit, but Trump has been getting like increasingly mad at Putin. They even made that truth where he's like, I don't know if Putin was trying to trick me the whole time or wasn't being serious or what's going on.
Oh, that was sad.
Like an actual fucking.
I actually felt bad reading that. Yeah, she's like a fucking like boyfriend being upset. That's actually kind of I don't know. It made me like kind of go oh when I read it. He's like Putin. I think Vladimir. He might be actually possibly mayhaps lying to me. He was upset. So yeah, but at the same time, he always says like Zelensky is no better. Like I'm super disappointed like with their their attack, and he basically gave like blanket permission to bomb us after that. He said like he was on the phone with Putin, and Putin told him that he will retaliate, and he's like they gave him like this attack spider web gave them the Putin the like permission and reason to like bomb the hell out of them. I think he said of Ukraine. And I'm like, did he need it before? Like I'm not gonna like, be that like terrified because he literally was doing the exact same shit like before since 22, like 100, 200 missiles. Like in Israel, they missed, I believe, 7 ballistics or something like that this time that actually smacked. And I was like, that's like a very good day in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Like 7 ballistics is like, chill Tuesday, we call it, okay? Relaxed Wednesday, I don't know, whatever. So it's just was very jealous, I will admit, watching how their shit like was working and like intercepting shit, and like most of the missiles were, take down pretty much almost all drones, I believe. So yeah, well, I wish we could do that instead of stopping them with our face. But, well, we ain't Israel, obviously, so.
Well.
Not gonna work like that, I imagine.
Hope for the best.
Anytime soon.
Hopefully the European stuff comes through somehow, in some way. Hopefully Russia tires itself out or somehow, some way. And, yeah, I mean, I hope for the best.
They're trying to go for a major breakthrough, I think, in like Sumy region mostly, but also like in Kharkiv and in Dnipro, 2 oblasts. 3, Sumy, Kharkiv, and Dnipro. But they're like sort of successful in Sumy right now, unfortunately, which is very bad because most people in Sumy, in the city, are super afraid that they will go close enough to be in artillery range, which is the worst thing ever because then they start just bombasting like artillery like they did with Kharkiv in 22 before counteroffensives. That's like the worst case scenario because there's no rhyme or reason at all. It's just all over the city you just get artillery shells. So that's really not good for Sumy, obviously. And I don't know how that will turn out. Our guys are trying very hard to push them back now, but we haven't received like pretty much aid for 5 months now, I think, again. So I don't know. Yeah, it's pretty difficult. We will see how it goes. With Kharkiv, I'm not particularly worried that they will be closer. But with Sumy, I am, yeah. Also, they're doing some mad shenanigans, like moving a bunch of troops and equipment to Belarus. So maybe they will try to do something from there, like north to Kyiv, I think. But people like panicking that they will attack the Baltics, but I think it's like, people just
there's no shot,
losing their
world.
shit.
Yeah, that would be so stupid.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also don't believe that. But in the attacking maybe like going like for Kyiv direction again, maybe. But I don't know. It just doesn't make that much sense considering they're not having that much success in the current 3 waves they're doing. So I don't know. We shall see, I guess. But yeah, also our boy Hassan fucking lost it again, like with Iran. I watched a little bit of his clips, to be honest, not the entire thing. But there was like this thing that he called, people have sent me, Jelani in Syria, like Jelansky or something like that.
Wait, I don't understand. Wait,
Jelansky? It's Hassan called new leader of Syria, Jelani.
Oh, because he's saying there.
Jelansky?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy because for Hassan, like
I
if you watch these people do like social media, like they legitimately get. It's not as bad with Ukraine, Russia as it is with Israel, Israel stuff. But like whenever Iran like bombs Israel, or like when Israeli hostages are killed, the people are like excited and happy, and it's like very demented and very crazy. Like I can understand if you want to hate the West or whatever, but like when you get to the point where you're cheering on Iran, or like the people that are kind of like cheering on Russia, it's like, well, come on, what's going on here, guys? What are we doing? It's really cringe. Yeah.
Yeah, but also like, like I don't understand. Was he like making like trying to make it sound like Zelensky because Zelensky is like also like a Jewish American puppet, or like according to him, I guess, or he was just like memeing that he Jew that he's pro-Israel. Like I just what the fuck? Like genuinely, like this like very
Oh.
very unhinged. Considering this is
People are saying
guys
that
like
on Twitter. They say that they look alike, apparently. So Jelani plus Zelensky equals Jelonsky or whatever. That's what people are saying.
oh, so all Semites look alike, I guess.
I don't know.
I don't think they look alike. They're just dudes with dark hair and dark eyes. That's it. There's the only thing that's very similar.
Oh, holy shit! Never mind. I just
well-
got a picture of these guys. I think they actually do look pretty similar. If Zelensky grew his beard out a lot
Dude,
more,
you're racist.
100%. Yeah,
You're
is he a little shaggier? Yeah, I would buy it. Yeah, for sure. I'd say so.
Oh my god, Americans.
I'd say so.
Actually, unironically racist. They're like, them Semites are all identical, okay?
I feel like this is close.
Well,
enough.
ears are kind of similar, I will say. The ears are similar, okay, I give you that. Yeah, well, anyway, also he went with like comparison, like basically saying that Iran in this situation is Ukraine, which I found hilarious.
Oh,
Like, it
I
was
was
very
watching
funny.
that because he was giving these explanations. I'm like, wait, none of this makes sense. I don't understand what he's saying in terms of them attacking for no reason. Like, what is? And then I realized, I think I was like 15 seconds into listening to him explain. I was like, oh, in Hassan's example, Iran is Ukraine and Israel is Russia. I see. Yeah, yeah. So, oh my god, it's actually so stupid, dude. Yeah, it's
Yeah. It was, especially as a Ukrainian, is extra hilarious because Iran is like, basically full-on ally of Russia and like the main producer of the weaponry they use against us every day, like literally every day. Like I haven't been a day that they haven't used Shahid on my city and my region. So it's just pretty funny, but also like unhinged. I guess his logic is that Israel attacked Iran. So in this situation, Russia attacked Ukraine, I guess. Like that's basically it, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Also, he was like, regional powers, like, they need to be taught the language of strength. And you're like, Iran is literally a regional power. Like, bro, like they're not like an innocent little small country that is being bullied by everyone stronger than them. Like it's just they're literally like amplifying all the fucking jihadi fucking mercenary assheads that they can find,
Yeah.
that are doing like mass atrocities in multiple countries at the same time, as mostly against other Arab people and Syrians, and that's just whatever,
It's pretty dumb.
who cares about them, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Syria, I think if you listen to that guy, it seems like he's not happy that Assad is no longer there. So
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know.
again, as long as they're against the West, everybody likes them. So like Hassan is like pro Houthis, he's pro Hezbollah, he was pro Assad. Like they all are. It's just how it works. Yeah.
But he also is like Assad was also chill with Israel. So I don't know.
Was Assad
like,
chill with- I don't
why
think-
Jelani?
I don't think Assad and
He
Israel
was
got
pretty chill.
maybe chill insofar
Like,
as
there
like
wasn't-
they were spending like 15 years in his own civil war in his own country, maybe. So he was not like as
Yeah, that's what I mean. So
Oh,
it wasn't
sure.
like Assad was like on a war mission against Israel like
Oh,
Iran
sure.
was or something like.
'Cause his own shit was getting
too
fucked
busy
up, yeah.
killing half million people in his own country. So it's like it's quite he had like two things. Like killing his own citizens with chemicals and hanging them publicly, and also spending all the time with the 100,000 cars he had in his garage. So it's like you don't have time. You don't have time for everything on the anti-Jew missions, I guess. But
yeah.
just a bit weird. Yeah. And last thing, what your thoughts on the protests that are happening in the U.S.?
I mean, I thought they were nice. I thought they were pretty good. Yeah.
No King thing seems cool. Like No King's thing, I saw like a lot of people participated. I don't know exact number, but people said like millions participated. Like
Yeah, it
all
was a
over
lot of
the
people. There wasn't any
US.
crazy like violent shit going on.
Yeah, and they have American flags for once.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah,
I was
I feel
like,
like we need
"Yay,
more.
they
We need
learned."
more organizers, and we need more like actual goals with our protests. I think in the United States we've kind of forgotten how to organize and protest effectively because we don't make good demands, and then we don't have like good leaders to kind of like shepherd the people into effective protests. So we just kind of get out and show that we're mad, and then it feels like it's a little bit directionless.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was good. I mean, yesterday was good, but.
At the beginning it was giga cringe because it seems like a fuck ton of like commies were running around.
For a
That
couple days,
seems
I
to
was like
be,
LA
like,
kind of, yeah, but
yeah. Yeah, I was not happy with that because it like looked like straight up rioting, looting with just we hate America, fuck all cops, and yeah, it's not protest to make America better. It's protest because you hate it. Like it's not gonna like amplify your message, and the most importantly, not gonna attract the majority of people on your side, which is what you want.
yeah.
If you want like some successful, thing to be done. And there's like no rhyme or reason, like burden of the fucking flags, fucking Palestinian shit. What was it doing there? Like for like what reason? Like there was like a lot of like weird stuff. I was like, annoyed by it. But then it kind of like libs actually like popped off, it seems. Finally.
Yeah.
Do something.
I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of
so that's
like
good.
center left people out there. They just need to feel like they can go. Like I don't think there's a lot of Democrats out there that want to join like a protest that's obsessed with like pronouns in Gaza or whatever. But the protest yesterday,
Yeah.
I mean, there were like I've seen anywhere from up to 10 million people were involved. Like one of the largest protests in U.S. history. So I mean, they're out there. They just need their voices just need to be made like heard a little bit more. Yeah.
Also, the messaging is pretty cool, like No King's thing, and like all the stuff I wrote like on the boards was like very much about America, about like the fact that immigrants make you great, like amplifying that sort of message. It seems like wholesome and good, something that can attract people. Because like I have experience in that, obviously, with my dad being, huge successful revolution. But it's just that really aimless, it seems, in most cases, and also like we really wanted to attract the majority population. That was like one of the main things, and it's like it annoys the fuck out of me that the leftoids, they just despise the majority population, because they're leftists. Yeah, so they pretend that they are for the small people, for the proletariat, whatever, right? So they're for the working rights people, but when actually it comes to that, they really don't like the majority population because it's not commie enough, I guess.
Yeah.
So because of that, it just becomes silly because when we started protesting, we were like, especially like in Kharkiv, we were like minority, and people thought that we are like, I don't know, drug addicts, like retard youngsters who have nothing better to do with their time, which is what usually people think about the protesters, if I'm honest, right? But it was up to us to show them that we actually have a good goal, that we don't want to tolerate this like corrupt oligarch, tyrannical fuck, that it will not be allowed, right? And that beating up our people and getting away with it and refusing our rights to process, to assembly, refusing European Union, road to European Union is not what we want. We want different. We want no corruption. We want working institutions. We want to move towards European Union, not towards Russia. And we don't want police state with police brutality and Belarus situation going on. So that was pretty fucking clear, and it also united like everyone. So you had like Eurosceptic losers being like, we don't want European Union, but they still didn't want Yanukovych. Okay, so that's uniting, right? You have like very far right people, for example, who are like super duper like nationalist types, and they like might disagree with a lot of European stuff, like all the Western degeneracy gay situation, but also they don't want Yanukovych and they hate Russia. So we all agree on that, right? And then you have like anarchist leftoid people who don't agree with all of those people, but they don't want tyrannical dictator Yanukovych still. So it kind of like, kind of united everyone under the banner, essentially. Like a regular person was just upset to see like students being beat up to a pope, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Some people really wanted European Union because of all the opportunities it will give us to stop being like monkeys in a zoo, essentially, and being allowed to visit European countries, to work there, all of that like regular person stuff. Also didn't want Yanukovych and didn't want to move towards Russia because that was like absolute opposite from what they wanted as a future of our country, obviously.
Yeah.
To be more like Poland, Czechia, all that, instead of being more like Belarus and Russia, obviously, right? So so I feel like that's just something like that really is about that at the end of the day, like why everything works so well. We also were very good like at organizing and trying to not provoke police first and special forces. So we only like attacked them after they attacked us, which is a little bit annoying to get like smashed, obviously. But unfortunately, it's kind of what you have to do. You kind of have to take hits.
Yeah, I mean, those were the videos that were going like viral over the rest of the world, right? It was what are they called? The Bekut or Bekrut? What are they called? The yellow jacket?
Berkut, yeah.
They were shooting at like
Berkut,
protesters and stuff behind like tin, trash can lids and stuff. Those were the videos that went mega viral. And I think that's what pushed you guys to like actually kicking Yanukovych out. Yeah.
Yeah, and also like 100 people plus died, and obviously that, bad and very sad when it happened, when first deaths happened, but also like kind of was needed to amplify the voice and to attract the nation, because we started with people like spitting at us, unironically, like actually spitting on us, to being glued to the TV screens and crying when protesters died.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a move you want to shift the whole like perspective of the people, and even people who didn't participate, they helped with like clothing because it was cold as fuck, like minus 20 degrees Celsius, shit. So yeah, they helped with food, with clothing. They helped with like keeping people there, and people would like change each other, which was also very effective. So some people would like stay for 1 week, other people would come stay for another week. Just basically like doing this sort of collaborative effort to never be moved from the square, because otherwise it will all end it,
Yeah.
We couldn't retake it, obviously. So, and also not backing down no matter what is what inspired many people. So I have like a lot of sort of Vatnik friends at the time who thought that we were paid, which is cringe, but that's what they believed.
Yeah.
But then when they saw people being sniped and being like water cannons in minus 20 degrees, they were like, no, no shot. Nobody's doing that, but like, 100, 4,000 hryvnias, our currency. Like nobody's doing that for money.
They make
so
the same
it was like really
accusations for U.S. protesters that like all of them are getting paid thousands of dollars, and it's like this would be
and all of them do that.
hundreds of millions of dollars. Like there's not a single paycheck that anybody can show as evidence of this. Like what the fuck, guys? Like it's so dumb. Yeah.
Yeah, conservative people tend to think that it's all paid and not authentic is the word, I think. And they tend to be like, those are like retarded, like jobless junkies, I guess. I don't know, like something like that. That usually tends to be the option, the kind of like the feel, I guess, all over all countries in a broader sense. But yeah, it was just like, it kind of like was crazy how it moved, because I was like afraid to go out with my like Maidan ribbons and all of that, because I would get attacked. And then at the middle of it, people who would like try to harass me would get attacked by other people on the street.
Yeah.
So people would defend you.
Yeah.
And that's like kind of like what you need. It's really what you need, because if it didn't become so popular and so favored by the majority population, it would never have succeeded.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but it wasn't fun, I will say, like getting like spit on and like beaten up and all of that, gassed, all sorts of things, and doing nothing. Like we had like multiple like things when we're like begging the police, essentially trying to ask them to honor the oath to the people, not to the corrupt tyrant, right? And we would like actually talk with them. We will try to appeal to them. Some actually were moved, which is quite interesting, because there was like a whole group that disbanded themselves they were like sent from Odessa to Kiev to basically beat up the protesters, and they sabotaged their car and never arrived.
Jeez.
So,
Okay.
respect that. Yeah, and also there are like some people who would try to at least like you could see that in their faces. Not all of them were like fucking monstrosities, obviously, right?
Mhm.
So some people were like obviously upset, but they were also scared because always, they would be like of a fuck ton of people, right? Can trample you, can like set you on fire, or like all sorts of things. Like obviously, like people would be on edge about that.
Mhm.
But yeah, a lot of them were unhinged, though. That's also true because, for example, Berkut or like Grifon in Kharkiv, they were absolutely wild people. They all then ended up joining Russia and just escaping after the annexation of like Crimea and Donbass and all of that. And there was like this one weird situation when they were like trying to just, I remember just standing and they all circled us, basically. They circled us and they were just, screaming at us, beating the bats on their like shields and all of that. And I remember they would scream like with the saliva actually like out of their face and screaming "Khachly" on us, which is a slur against Ukrainians
Okay. Jesus.
in Ukraine at us. Yes. And I was like so shocked when it happened because I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like those people, they don't even identify with like literally Ukraine at all. They're like, actually like hate Ukraine while being special forces in Ukraine.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that was wild shit. But yeah. And they were like dogs on a leash, like waited to be like unleashed,
Yeah.
and just bit the shit out of us. That was weird. But a lot of them were not like that. They just were like, following, I guess, orders. Which doesn't make it any like better to get hit by a guy like that than a guy who hates us, I guess, in a way. But yeah, that was quite difficult. I remember we also tackled all the people who were like doing like sabotage shit. So they were like agitators, right? Who would try to agitate the police into attacking. And we also all were like on their ass.
Mhm.
So we didn't like allow them to be unhinged because obviously it's not in our interest for armed people to attack us when we are unarmed. So
Yeah.
provoking them is not a great idea.
Yeah, you see the same thing
But
happens in
also
some of the U.S.
optics.
protests as well. Yeah.
Yeah, also the optics, like if they will attack, then they will attack us without us doing anything to them.
Mhm.
Not because we like throw, I don't know, Molotovs or like fireworks at them or some shit, like for no reason. Like when they do attack you, then yeah, sure, go off, right? Defend yourself how you can. But yeah, it's kind of like a balancing game, I guess you could say. And it won favor, so I guess it succeeded. But yeah, leftists are not of that opinion. Unfuck yourselves, I guess, before you unfuck America.
True. Okay.
I guess that's it, pretty much.
Yeah. Have fun. Be
Yeah,
careful.
have
Don't
a nice stream.
don't get blown up, and
It's not too fun.
yeah, we'll talk to you in the future.
Not particularly fun. I will say. But yeah, nice hearing you. And I'm also looking into your like court shit.
Oh,
Finally,
that's
I
boring.
didn't have
Don't
the
worry.
time.
Just give it a few months, and then I'll probably do a
It's
big
not,
write-up at the
actually.
end of it.
Yeah, but I was like at the middle of that giga moment. Actually, I was like, what to do? Okay. Well, you have 56 explosions. Like, what do I do? I was like, what the favorite streamer in the house doing?
Yeah.
So I open up and I see the court video, and I'm like, seems fair, like to listen to all the pornographic, like sex tape situation, judge court thing with like weird American shenanigans while I'm getting bombed as fuck. So that's what I did. So I'm up on it now.
Okay. Well, hopefully some stuff is made public soon that I can read through, which would be fun. But otherwise, just waiting and waiting.
Yeah.
That's all we do. Yeah.
But happy going. You're like at least getting some closure with the judge,
Yeah.
not being unhinged on that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Have a nice evening, day, whatever it is, and yeah, bye bye.
Yeah. Have fun. Be careful. Bye. Okay.
in Western capitals, and I see it a lot even among some very strong supporters of Israel around the world. There's a tendency to want Israel to be perceived as the David and not the Goliath. And I understand it, by the way, right? Because you're sitting there and you're thinking, give me a break. It's a country of 10 million people surrounded by enemies that want to wipe it off the map, and it's been in a state of war since its founding, been fighting this since October 7th, it's Seven Front War. Of course Israel's the David. And you want to tell all of Israel's critics, like, who are you kidding here? But the reality is it's the wrong message. Because in the world of geopolitics, if your goal is to find friends that provide strategic value, or at least start to cultivate what could be future friends, say Saudi Arabia for Israel, they really aren't interested in David. They want to partner with Goliath, right? They want to piggyback onto strength. If I look at before October 7th, Israel was inching closer and closer to a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia. If you ask yourself why that was happening, why that was moving so fast, if you ask yourself why the Abraham Accords happened, it was because Israel was a technology superpower globally, an economic superpower in the region, and a military and intelligence juggernaut that Saudi wanted to piggyback onto that strength. And that strength, or the perception of the strength, was punctured on October 7th. And I think what you have seen, beginning with the pager attack, if you want to bookend it, to what Israel has just accomplished over the last few days, it's sent a message that Israel is actually a Goliath. And I think countries around the world, leaders around the world say, hey, we want to be with that. We could never do that. That's impressive. We want that. And I think the U.S. government and the president have a similar approach. They're like, of course, wait a minute, that country's our ally? That country's our friend? We like what they're doing. That's impressive. And I will say, in a world in which the U.S., in ways that make me uncomfortable, to be honest, or in a world in which the U.S. is increasingly pulling back from world affairs, and this is a 20-year trend, basically, but obviously we're watching it right now, too, from President Trump's perspective, and the leadership of the U.S., they say, okay, we're pulling back, but that country, Israel, that one's with us. And look what they just did. And in a world in which we're pulling back our resources, it's good to know that they can do what they can do. And so I think, ultimately, in the world of geopolitics and diplomacy, Israel is much better off doing things like it just did. And I think, to your point, the president is like softly supporting something versus watching what plays out and then supporting it very publicly and energetically is the difference between a dazzling operation and one that stumbles.
Yeah, I think a lot about brands, and I think geopolitics is 98% brand and 2% actual hard power, and that is, most people never come in contact with an American or America, but they've heard that we spend $800 billion on a military and have a very strong, our memory is long and our reach is far. And also that we're generally, I think, until recently perceived as the good guys, which makes them more likely to want to do business with us, and their best.
I mean, the brand is built on your ability to do hard power, right? So of course you don't have to use hard power all the time, but your brand is built on your hard power. When we invaded Iraq, we fucked up Iraq. When we bombed Libya, we fucked up Libya. When we did the Yugoslavia shit, we fucked up. Like, it's not like it's just our brand. Although maybe he means that in a roundabout way, that you don't have to show hard power all the time to make people afraid of your hard power. But
best and brightest universities here, and more likely to alert the American embassy if they hear about a terrorist cell trying to infiltrate U.S. interests. And I think soft power brand, if you will. And I was thinking of the Israeli brand was this peanut butter and chocolate of. It's strange. The world, and you said this, is comfortable with a dead Jew. And that is, I remember that my first exposure to Israel and Judaism was in '72. We were watching the Olympics, and I remember for the first time registering, and my parents looked really upset and concerned, and they were staring at the TV of this guy in an apartment complex on the balcony with a ski mask on, and asking what was going on. And that was, the Munich Olympics and the slaughter of the Israeli athletes. And then, so it was like, okay, they're a victim. And that, I think, really benefited Israel to be seen as you said, as the David, constantly, that anti-Semitism is a light sleeper, and obviously the Holocaust. And then the second part was, I remember I think I was in the 7th grade, us spending an entire class talking about the Operation Entebbe and the rescue, and just quite frankly, how badass that was. And you're a 12-year-old boy, you think, wow, Israel, right? And it strikes me that the brand most recently is more the latter than the former. And
true.
Now, I think that's a good thing. I think basically Israel said, look, if you get comfortable with dead Jews, you got to start getting comfortable with fighting Jews. And I actually think that is a more advantageous position, that we're going to go on the offense, we are not to be fucked with, and we are very good at what we do. And our men and women in uniform are not only incredibly brave, they're incredibly well resourced. And the people on the ground are very good at what they do. So my sense is I see this, I'm curious to get your take, I see this as the most important. Israel's actions around cutting off the hands of all of these proxies of Iran, whether it's the Houthis or Hezbollah or Hamas and now Iran, that similar to what Ukraine has done fighting back against Russia, that they have defanged what was seen as the superpower in the Gulf. And now I would argue that the superpower in the Gulf, hands down, is Israel. The only thing they have that Saudi Arabia has is they don't have oil. Right. But it looks as if in an information economy, you'd rather have an entrepreneurial culture. And you wrote a book on this called Startup Nation. Could this potentially be a real unlock, if you will, around, I'm trying to look at the glass as half empty here, that they come to some sort of agreement with Iran, that Saudi Arabia steps up and says, all right, sucks to be around, they're the power in the region. And this might result in something resembling a sustainable peace.
What we've just witnessed over the last few days, and really I think over the past year, is...
Why was I link this? I don't care. All right.
Israel just went ham.
What is this? Don't care about this. What is this?
We're having our intern take the bar exam cam into our guide into those cars.
Okay, I don't care about this. All right, we'll do this guy, and then we'll do the Peterson-Harris one.
On Iran. Today, we're going to learn how Mossad intelligence agents on the ground inside Iran sabotage their enemy's most precious assets. The gigantic 200 aircraft air campaign overhead, a battle damage assessment of both forces' attacks, and what this might mean for the balance of power in the entire region. Welcome back to Cappy Army. I'm an Iraq veteran and war correspondent. We make weekly videos about wars, weapons, and geopolitics. The first thing you need to know is the Israeli ground sabotage took place in 3 phases. Phase 1 started 8 months ago, when Israeli operatives from Mossad were already inside Iran, living under fake identities. This is when they began work on the mission. For months, they covertly smuggled in drones and explosives through the borders. Ordinary civilian vehicles were then modified in-country so they could launch attack drones. They were attack drone platforms. These disguised, weaponized trucks were then parked at key locations throughout Iran. Each one was placed within...
Oh, crazy. This is kind of similar-ish to the, I guess a little bit to the Ukraine stuff, huh? Damn, these drones are some serious shit, guys.
20 kilometers of their target so that they were within range. They were focused on knocking out Iran's SAM sites. This means Israeli intelligence was able to get a fix on the location of Iran's radar network and their anti-air systems, and they were able to penetrate perimeter security to get close enough with these vehicles. So on the morning of Friday the 13th, these drones were activated and they flew out the backs of the vehicles to their targets, destroying air defense assets and crippling Iran's air protection. I would say that this is unlike anything we've ever seen before. I would say that this is unprecedented, but this is literally exactly what we just saw Ukraine did with their drones in Russia like a week ago. Now, phase 2 of the attack, though, makes this very different than what we saw in Russia, because at the same time as all this attack drone tomfoolery was happening inside Iran, a covert group of Israeli Special Forces commandos infiltrated on the ground into central Iran, possibly by stealth helicopters or cargo planes that were seen operating in Syria later that day. The commandos avoided local security as they made their way to the remote locations in the desert. Their mission was to destroy Iranian anti-air missile systems. The soldiers used Spike non-line-of-sight missile launchers, which means those mad lads infiltrated to within 30 kilometers of their target. The team of agents fired these remote-controlled munitions and steered them mid-air straight into the air defense systems, knocking them out. Spike missiles have very little signature when they're fired, meaning they're not as loud or as much of a thermal signature as some other weapon systems, which allows them to stay undetected. This system is a perfect tool for the job, since it can be launched from indoors and from concealed spots. The fire and forget mode basically allows the operator to accurately guide that round mid-air onto the surface-to-air missile systems that they were targeting. So Spike missiles have a hit probability of over 95%, and they have a margin of error of less than 1 friggin' meter. I had all of that done in 3D and animated because stuff doesn't make sense to me if I can't see it visually. But these ground attacks were only the beginning phase of this insane operation. Because wait till you see what they have cooked up next. If you're someone posting spicy political memes online, your personal information is probably already exposed. Jesus. This video sponsor, Delete Me, ran my privacy report, and I was freaking shocked. They found 51 pieces of my personal information, including my name, my address, phone number, on 8 different data broker sites, including PeopleWin. Am I allowed to blow those places' names up? Good, fuck them. I mean, seriously, that's my safety we're talking about.
That's
I
safety,
still get death
guys.
threats from people messaging me that they wish the Kremlin would kill me, and they're trying to dox me for that time that I went into Russia. These places are legit f***ed up for sharing that information. Delete Me removed my details, keeping me and my family safe. My privacy advisor got rid of 8 of these listings. That's time I didn't have to waste digging through sketchy opt-out pages. In total, they saved me about 4.5 hours of work, but really though, the peace of mind is priceless. So fuck these data broker sites with their creepy magnifying glass logo. If you want your data deleted forever, just go to joindeleteme.com/CappyArmy and use code CAPPY to get 20% off. Links in the description. Back to the episode. I know some people prefer to have some IRL proof. Since then, we've learned Iran is warning that these vehicles are what Mossad used. We also believe that they used pickup trucks, smaller vehicles than basically what we saw in Ukraine. So we can see here, actual thermal video footage was released by Israel of their commandos on the ground in Iran using night vision goggles and what appears to be thermal blankets that conceals their thermal signature if they were going to be spotted by Iranian security forces. The fact that Israel released this video footage of their spies operating on Iranian soil is for a reason, I think. Normally, spy agencies bend all the way over backwards to keep their sources and methods under wraps. The likely reason that they chose to reveal this because they wanted to show how ineffective Iran's security is and how they operate with impunity. These agents could have exfiltrated out of there, because I'm always curious about, you go to one of the most dangerous spots, how do you get out of there? I get that they got into there, but how do you get out? So it might have been by helicopter, since Iran's air defense maybe couldn't have picked them up, like they did with the Syrian missile-based raid that they conducted about a year ago. So it's possible cargo aircraft could have picked them up. We saw them flying over Syria the next day. Maybe they recovered them. It appears to me, and everyone watching, that Israel's going for full-on raw dog regime change. All right, let's go into phase 3 of the ground sabotage. Probably the most insane of them all. Since at least 2024, Israeli undercover agents have been working on secretly building a kamikaze drone base inside the heart of the city of Tehran. So they didn't even put it in a mobile launcher site. They were just building it under their noses, right on their soil the whole time. Okay. This was carefully placed right on the outskirts of the city. They call it a base, but it was likely a house, and almost certainly in violation of their HOA.
Destiny, stance on street blockades. In my opinion, it depends on the protest, but in my country, it's so normalized to the point to you can get people blocking a highway because of a neighborhood issue. Fully pro-police intervention there. So, I mean, like, the thing I always say is that, like, if there's an area that has a ton of study and a ton of information that's already been talked about, like, I would be very arrogant to come in and just say, this is how it should be done. So like there must be protesters in the past that have talked about effective ways to protest. I'm gonna buy some MLK book. We're gonna fucking read this, okay? My gut feeling is that doing those types of blockades are really bad because it makes ordinary citizens fucking hate you. But maybe there's a reason that I'm not aware of that makes them really effective. I don't know, but that would be my gut feeling. If I was like a working person that had to drive to work and there was like a blockade, I feel like I would, whatever that protest is, I would hate it more than anything in the world. It would never, and there's no world where it's ever bringing me over to its side. So I'm not sure.
Inside the house, there were attack drones programmed to fly at the nearby Iranian base of Esfeh-Jabad. This is one of the most well-protected, highly sensitive bases because it's where they have a number of their long-range ballistic missile launchers. The drones were remotely activated by agents in the middle of the night at around 3 a.m. They struck the missile base, and then additional kamikaze drones appear to have targeted high-value generals and scientists living in Tehran. Israel tricked some of Iran's top commanders into gathering in the same place for a meeting. They did this by studying their movement patterns, and then they were able to eliminate them all in this way, according to Israel at least. The goal was to nerf Iran's retaliatory capabilities. The explosive one-way drones targeted surface-to-surface missiles that were going to retaliate against Israel, based on what they'd seen happen in the past. This sabotage took them a year to smuggle commandos and weaponry through their borders. This paved the way for what would happen next. Once Iran's air defense had been hit hard, a massive coordinated air campaign involving 200 Israeli fighter jets attacked. Israel deployed a mix of F-35s, F-16s, and F-15s. They likely traveled through Syria, which right now has limited to no air defense. The F-35s used external fuel tanks likely to extend their range at the cost of stealth. They launched GBU-31 500-pound JDAM precision bombs designed to hit specific targets. In total, they fired something like 330 munitions so far from the air. Now, that was an old estimate as well, so it's probably much higher now. Their special forces had destroyed the city's air defense. The jets had air superiority. They could operate with impunity. There was reportedly...
Would you call what is happening between Israel and Iran a war currently? I don't know. It feels probably not a full-on war, I guess. I don't know if what would we even use that word for? It feels like wars are things to depose leaders, which they could theoretically kind of do, or things that involve like the mobilization of ground armies or the conquering of territory. I don't think they're going to do either of those two things. I don't know. It's just kind of a word. There's not like a strict definition, I think.
Very little activity seen from Iranian air defense. The Israeli Air Force reportedly flew SEAD missions, which are suppression of air defense. So they destroyed around a dozen radars, and then we'll get into the battle damage assessment later of how many air defense systems were destroyed, but it's a friggin' lot. The fighter jets were able to penetrate deep into Iranian airspace and launch their standoff missiles at individual targets. These could have been fired from up to about 400 kilometers or 250 miles away and could have hit individual buildings. The F-35s hit residential apartment buildings in Tehran, which is an escalation compared to what we've seen happen in the past. Nuclear facilities and missile production bases were hit. Over 100 different targets inside Iran were hit during 5 waves of airstrikes. This hit the Natanz nuclear site and targeted their ballistic missile sites at Bid Kana. That's where several of their missile development and production facilities are located. Here on the map, you can see all the locations that were confirmed to be hit. This has been the first few days in what we anticipate will very likely, very possibly be, a weeks-long air campaign of multiple sorties by Israel and Iran, according to word from their officials. The Institute for the Study of War stated, strikes that destroy components of Iran's air defense systems will cause a temporary disruption to Iranian defenses that would enable Israeli fourth-generation, non-stealthy aircraft to operate in Iranian airspace with greater ease. Israeli officials claim to have full control of the airspace, without a single Iranian jet being scrambled in response because their air force is essentially non-existent. For many years, the popular saying has always been that amateurs talk tactics, while experts talk logistics. But now the line between logistics and tactics have been blurred. I think we're seeing the weaponization of transportation systems unlike anything we've seen before in military history. Let's talk about where Iran's air defense is at, because Iran started firing old-school, antiquated anti-air flak into the sky. It looks like a picture that wouldn't be out of place in World War II. Their most common type of anti-aircraft gun is the Zu-23 mil cannon. It can fire 3 kilometers out, but Israeli fighter jets firing glide bombs fly higher than that and would be definitely out of range. Iran claimed that they'd shot down 2 Israeli F-35s so far, though. So far, we haven't seen evidence yet. Let's be honest. Let's not mince words. This is, I think, theatrical. It's for the Iranian leadership to make a show of force for their people on the ground who might not understand otherwise that this anti-aircraft flak fire is ineffective. But that's about it. Seeing flak instead of anti-air missiles going up into the sky is some visual evidence that air defense was destroyed by the Israeli ground sabotage. Iran claimed that they'd shot down 2 Israeli F-35s so far, though. So far, we haven't seen evidence yet. So far, all we've seen is one uncorroborated, fake, computer-generated AI image that has a combination of F-16, F-35, different parts that reveal that it's not real. But what about the battle damage assessment so far? Satellite and radar images are coming in immediately because there was no cloud cover. Initial information suggests they targeted about 25 of Iran's nuclear scientists. It appears like at least 6 of them were killed. Their whole high-up leadership was targeted, and at least 30 senior Iranian commanders have been killed so far. 40 Iranian air defense systems have reportedly been destroyed since the start of the operation. Israel released multiple videos of Iran's ballistic missile launchers getting destroyed by their ground operators. This could explain why it took multiple volleys throughout the day for Iran to reach 150 missiles fired at Israel, when they normally fire them all at once.
Since news stories in the U.S. last 1 to 3 days shouldn't Democrat influencers like yourself try to control the narrative when the story is so fresh by commenting on its breaking? There's plenty of people that do breaking news. I just don't like it. I think it's boring as fuck. There are other people that do it. I don't think it's necessarily bad to do breaking news. I just hate it. I don't have the mind for it.
Commander of the Revolutionary Guard and military chief of staff were both confirmed dead by Iran themselves. Take a look at their military command structure to give you an idea of how devastating this has been for Iran.
Rip.
This is meant to create a leadership vacuum that made quick retaliation more difficult. What's escalated and different here compared to some of the attacks we've seen in the past is they targeted these generals and scientists at their residential homes in Iran.
Wild, bro.
The Iranian government confirmed the deaths of these
Jesus Christ. Got him.
These generals and scientists at their residential homes in Iran. The Iranian government confirmed the deaths of these high-value leadership and that 78 people were killed, including over 320 wounded in the Israeli attacks, according to Iran. They claim the majority...
It's like, I'm imagining there's like a leak and you can see like, okay, what is Israel targeting? It's like, here's the address and the apartment number. And it's like, why do they need an apartment number for a missile attack?
Were civilians. So one of the things that stuck out to me as really interesting is what we're not seeing as much as what we are seeing. It's shocking that we haven't seen or even heard from Hamas or Hezbollah, these proxy forces of Iran.
Because these guys have got fucking obliviated. They need a nap. Jesus.
That in the past have been the type of forces that would launch attacks on Israel normally in a situation like this. And what about the Iranian retaliation so far? The fact that Iran is now targeting Israel's population centers and residential areas is an escalation compared to what we've seen in the past. A few apartment buildings were hit, and then another volley later on ended with Israel's military headquarters getting struck. It's called the Kiryat, which is like their version of the American Pentagon. A war correspondent on the ground in Israel, Trey Yingst, said, quote, an entire block nearly completely destroyed, wiped off the map. So far, 150 Iranian ballistic missiles were fired, which is similar to past attacks that they've done on Israel before in terms of volume. At least 7 of the missiles avoided air defense interceptors and hit the ground and impacted. Video evidence shows some of the missiles were intercepted, though. In the past, Iran only fired missiles at Israel's military bases. The attacks weren't that accurate because hitting a plane with a ballistic missile, hitting a plane-sized target is much more difficult than hitting, say, an entire city. So they were able to kill at least 3 Israeli citizens, and over 40 people were wounded, according to Israeli officials so far. My personal assessment of the attack so far have been that Iran has been unable to inflict similar strategic blows to Israel so far compared to what they've received. This could change tomorrow. Israel began targeting Iran's economic sector, hitting their oil fields, which is something they haven't done in the past. It's an escalation that they said they would do if their population centers were hit. It's important to note this could change tomorrow. Israel began targeting Iran's economic sector, hitting their oil fields, which is something they haven't done in the past. It's an escalation that they said they would do if their population centers were hit. It's important to note this all started with what Israel calls their Begin Doctrine. Israel officially drew a line in the desert sand and made it policy, a principle, that they won't allow an enemy state to acquire nuclear weapons, and since then they've bombed Syria's nuclear reactor,
Syria, Iraq, and now Iran.
And now Iran's. So what has the American response been so far? 2 U.S. naval destroyers are assisting with shooting down Iran's missiles, alongside multiple American Patriot batteries that have been moved into position in recent months, as we've talked about, and THAAD anti-air launchers are also in position. This could explain why the U.S. diverted some 20,000 interceptors from Ukraine to go to the Middle East for U.S. troops instead a few weeks ago. It's confirmed that American fighter jets are now patrolling the skies in the Middle East region. They're now on station overhead, protecting U.S. troops and facilities. And I think this is a major hint as to why Israel was even able to consider this attack. This is just my personal opinion, and you guys can tell me what you think, but it looks like to me that the type of targets that Israel went after here suggests that their goal was to weaken the entire Iranian government. If Israel doesn't have the military capability, the bunker-busting bombs necessary, the 30,000-pound variant of it, to completely destroy Iran's deeply buried nuclear program, then their best bet would be to delegitimize the Iranian government. Their best bet would be to take out senior leadership to show the world that Iran has no credible deterrence. It's possible the diplomatic dance over the past few weeks has been tailored to the attack as well. We don't have confirmation on when the U.S. government knew these Israeli strikes were imminent, and we don't know if possibly the ongoing negotiations were used to provide a disguise to trick Iran in the final days into thinking that talks would continue into Sunday, because the top U.S. envoy to the negotiations had planned a 6th round of talks on Sunday. 6 rounds. Maybe if they'd gone to 12 rounds of talks, it would have resolved. The 7 times the charm. Was Iran really building a nuclear weapon? Israel says they were creating a crude warhead. Personally, if you ask me, I'm sorry, but I'm I'm gonna need more evidence than trust me, bro. Just because it wasn't true about Iraq 20 years ago doesn't mean it's necessarily a CIA lie again today.
I mean, to be fair, that the International Atomic Energy Agency did, I think, come out and basically say as much, right?
But I'm certainly going to need a whole lot more evidence if you...
Destiny, would like to know why you think Iran would just lob nukes at the West the second they get them. I'm sure you would like to know that, considering I've never said that before in my entire fucking life, and you're completely inventing it. Is deterrence not a thing anymore? Why do you keep harping on the death to America chants when North Korea also said... Okay, never mind, you're not. So, boring troll is boring. Okay.
you want me to believe it today. We know that the US's own intelligence assessments continue to say that Iran was not pursuing an active nuclear weaponization program as of now. How the heck did Israeli covert agents smuggle all those weapons? A CIA lie again today. But I'm certainly going to need a whole lot more evidence if you want me to believe it today. We know that the US's own intelligence assessments continue to say that Iran was not pursuing an active nuclear weaponization program as of now. How the heck did Israeli covert agents smuggle all those weapon systems into the country? Based on past Mossad operations, we know that foreign passports a lot of times are used from European countries so they can plant agents inside Iran.
Oh shit, I thought these were like massive fucking spider robot things, but they're just camels. Cringe.
Operations. We know that foreign passports a lot of times are used from European countries so they can plant agents inside Iran. We know that in the 2010s, Mossad agents entered Iran as regular old business people, journalists, or aid workers, and they would build cover stories for years prior to going there. These agents are then used to coordinate local assets. So they'll find people inside Iran that are sympathetic to their cause or that hate the current regime. They provide on-the-ground recon and they move the contraband drones and explosives over time, bit by bit. Previous covert actions used fake plumbing equipment, car parts, and appliances to smuggle in weapons. So they would disassemble the drones, the explosives, the launchers, and ship them separately. Then they would reassemble them in Iran. Add to that the fact that tools like 3D printers mean they could create parts in the country easily. Mossad has historically partnered with anti-regime ethnic minorities, like you got the Kurds in the northwest and the Balak rebels in the southeast. These groups control parts of the porous borders with Iraq, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Is there a threat of drone attacks of these type from deep inside American soil? Is that a serious concern? It's possible, yes. This threat is more likely a problem for America's military bases abroad, though. And personally, I think it could explain why we saw drones going near military bases in places like New Jersey. They may have been running training operations to see if they could defeat against this type of attack that was being planned all around the world. Personally, I think it's kind of crazy how drones were able to in both Russia and Iran in just a matter of weeks. So I'm always curious, what is the US Army doing about this massive change with drone warfare? If you're interested in learning about how the American recon teams are planning to use kamikaze drones to defeat China, you can check out this video that we made here. As always, if you want exclusive content, the full show notes and sources for this episode, you can find them on cappyarmy.com, link in the description. Thank you again to Delete Me for sponsoring this episode. Greatly appreciate their support, and we encourage you to check them out as well. Thank you guys for watching. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy, ending transmission now.
Wow. Why is he doing a show with AirPods in? Oh, they're doing a mobile or off-location digital remote. They're doing a raw show. Sorry.
I'm increasingly worried that we have effectively rendered ourselves ungovernable based on the way we have shattered the information landscape.
This is a consequence of hyperconnectivity and stunning ease of communication.
You can just go down a rabbit hole and find endless confirmation that's fairly anonymized.
We have to ground our perceptions in an axiomatic framework.
The old norms that the gatekeepers, I mean, for all their faults, they had standards.
I don't trust anything the New York Times prints at all. The gatekeeping institutions have also revealed themselves as catastrophically flawed.
The antidote to that, to the failures of institutions, is not new standards. It's really to apply the old standards.
I've spent a lot of time over the years speaking with Sam Harris.
Yeah?
We've spoken publicly half a dozen times and privately far more than that.
Wow.
We're coming at the same problems, I would say, from quite different perspectives and establishing some concordance over time. Today, we went down the rabbit hole of rabbit holes, I suppose, discussing the fragmentation of the narrative landscape on the social media front and what that means for cultural incoherence, weakness, demoralization, deceit, self-deception, and inability to understand one another.
Okay.
And so join us as we attempt to clarify the catastrophe of infinite plurality. Well, Mr. Harris, it looks like it's time for our approximately annual conversation.
Yeah, nice. You're the clock that ticks once a year.
Yeah, well, I suspect that's more than enough. So tell me what you're thinking about lately, Sam, on the intellectual side and what you're doing. Well,
it is actually relevant to the chaos in our politics at the moment. I'm increasingly worried that we have effectively rendered ourselves ungovernable based on the way we have shattered the information landscape. And I think independent media of the sort that we're indulging now is part of that problem. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of it or not.
True.
I've been fairly vociferous in criticizing some of our mutual friends, and in my case, some may be former friends, but fellow podcasters and people in independent media. And I just think they've been part of this shattering, and it's been fairly obvious. And the cases are different, but many people have been quite irresponsible in the way that they have platformed people uncritically and let them spread truly divisive and dangerous misinformation. I mean,
Okay, so Jordan Peterson disagrees with this with every fiber of his being. Will he actually express that disagreement, or is he just going to like yes and him, and there's not actually going to be a real back and forth?
I'm thinking especially of in the aftermath of October 7th and the global explosion of anti-Semitism. We've had some very big podcasts like Tucker's and Joe's platform Holocaust deniers and revisionists, and it's been quite insane out there. And it's just, and that's just one piece of it. I mean, you can talk about COVID or Trump or Ukraine or I mean, pick your ugly object out there. There's just a radical divergence of opinion into these echo chambers we build for ourselves, and it seems to be very difficult to cross political lines. I mean, it's somehow deeper than politics, actually.
Pivot and attack the left or the mainstream media every time. Pivot and attack the left or the mainstream media every time. Let's go.
So anyway, I'm just increasingly worried about that, and I'm trying to hold up my side of the conversation in ways so as to cross those lines. But I'm just noticing that it's in many cases it's proving impossible.
Yeah, okay, well, I am aware of that. It's actually part of the reason I thought it would be useful for us to talk today. So I want to think about how to respond to that to begin with. Well, I think the first thing that we should probably note is that this is a consequence of hyperconnectivity and stunning ease of communication.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, it's obviously the case that the landscapes of communication that once held us together, for better or worse, are now so multiplicitous that they're numberless. And so what does that mean? I think what it means in part, and this is where I think our conversation might get particularly interesting, is that we don't have a shared story anymore. And I think a culture is literally a shared story. And a story is a structure. This is, been part of our ongoing discussion for a very long period of time, right? The relationship between the perceptual framing that is constituted by a story and, let's say, the domain of objective facts, right? This is a very thorny problem. But it seems to me that you have a culture when people share the same story or the same stories. They have the same shared reference points. And with an infinite landscape of communication, that fragments indefinitely. And then no one, see, Sam, let me tell you, I might as well, just to annoy you, just to get the ball rolling. I spent a lot of time thinking about the story of the Tower of Babel. There's two stories in Genesis that describe how things go wrong. And one story is the flood, and that's the consequence.
I'm so curious how he's going to marry this to his anti-gatekeeper take later. Because I would agree, except I would say this in 1/10 the words. Having so many different speakers in society with no gatekeeping destroys our ability to have a coherent monoculture, right? The culture can originate from literally anywhere. You can start a funny meme on 4chan, Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, and it'll spread to all of society. Anybody can do this. We don't have a cohesive shared story as much anymore as a result of the duplicitous amount of speakers. But I feel like people like Jordan Peterson love that. Freedom of speech, more speech. We just need more freedom of speech. Because the way to counter that is that you have less speakers, and then you have more coherent lines of thought means less people screaming into the abyss. And he's about to do a Tower of Babel thing, which I feel like also points to that. But I don't know. I guess we'll see. Not duplicitous, multiplicitous, there's a word there. Multiplicitous or multiplicitous? Wait. Say it. How do you pronounce it? Hold on. Pronounce.
Multiplicity.
Multiplicitous, I think. Okay.
Of absolute chaos bursting forth, essentially. But the Tower of Babel is a story about both totalitarianism and fragmentation. So what happens is the engineers get together, because that's who it is. It's the city builders, the tool makers, those who create weapons of war, the city builders, the engineers. They get together and they build these towers for the aggrandizement of the local potentates. So there was competition in the Middle East of that time to build the highest tower for the glory of the local ruler. And that presumption, so you can think about that as misaligned aim on the sociological front. The consequence of this misaligned aim is a kind of, because the aim of the culture is wrong. Words themselves lose their meaning. That's what happens in the story, right? Everybody ends up speaking a different language, and then the towers fall apart. So it's because the story that's being told is one of human self-aggrandizement. That's part of it. And the culture pathologizes and then disintegrates. And so I see that happening in our.
I thought the main purpose of the Tower of Babel was just that mankind thought that they could do something better than God or without God. No. Tower of Babel. I'm pretty sure there's a short story. Genesis 11. Book of Genesis, chapter 11. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they've begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them there all over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. Kind of rude, I feel, but
culture, there's a technological element of it, obviously, that the technological utopians are driving this. The transhumanists are driving this. And we're aiming at the wrong goal. And the consequence of that is that our language is falling apart and we don't. And so I see that happening in our culture. There's a technological element of it, obviously, that the technological utopians are driving this. The transhumanists are driving this. And we're aiming at the wrong goal. And the consequence of that is that our language is falling apart and we don't share the same reference points. That's part of what's happening. So I'm curious about what you think about that, how that fits in with your concern, your emergent concern. Like, when you say fragmentation, Sam.
Like, how does it take him 4 minutes to say, I consider this disrespectful? I figured this out in the Finkelstein argument. I think that speaking like this is disrespectful. I think it's disrespectful to the audience and to the person that you're having a conversation with. There's no excuse to be speaking like this. And there's no excuse to be wasting so much time. You're doing a disservice to every single person involved. But
what is it that you think is fragmenting? Because it's not the objective view of the world precisely, although the scientific enterprise even seems to be shaky and corrupt and falling apart in many ways.
Well, so I agree with that. I think the analogy to Babel is quite apt. I don't think bringing Doge into Babel would have helped much. I think it is technological. Yeah, it's just the fact that because of I think largely it's a story of social media, but it's really the internet generally. Because of the information technology we have built, people can find endless confirmation of whatever their cherished opinion is, and it's no longer. There's some cultural immune system that has been lost, right? If you had to go to the physical conference,
like, they're both circling this topic, and I don't know if either wants to press on it. Jordan Peterson won't press on it because it stands in complete contradiction to everything that he fucking screeches about, and I don't know if Sam Harris will press on it because he doesn't want to make Jordan Peterson mad. But what they're really talking about is you don't have knowledgeable gatekeepers to deliver a coherent and consistent narrative to society anymore about what we should believe or how we should act or conduct ourselves. Instead, it's just a million voices screaming, into the abyss at each other, basically. At each other, into the abyss, both at the same time. That's what they're both complaining about, but will they get there? I don't know, let's see.
There's some cultural immune system that has been lost, right? If you had to go to the physical conference out in the real world to meet the other people who were sure they've been abducted by UFOs, well, then you'd be meeting these people. You would see the obvious signs of dysfunction in their lives, and there'd be more.
Like, he uses the UFO example. What about the myriad of examples around hydroxychloroquine, COVID-19, the vaccines, ivermectin? What about any number of lies and I know Sam Harris has covered them all because he fucking hates Trump. Why would we do the UFO example? Like, he couldn't even do flat Earth or the moon landing thing because I feel like those are a little bit more, or we don't have I don't know.
Friction to the maintenance of this new conviction, just based on the collision with other ancillary facts that have social relevance to you. But online, I mean, again, this even precedes social media. This is true of the internet back in the late 90s. You can just go down a rabbit hole and find endless confirmation that's fairly anonymized, right? You know, the 20-minute documentary that blew your mind and convinced you that the World Trade Center towers were brought down by the Bush administration. You didn't know that it was made by some 18-year-old in his mother's basement, and you didn't have to know that. You were just looking at the product online. But if you had to meet this person, all of a sudden you realize that this is the maintenance of this fiction becomes quite a bit harder. So we're living now, I think, in the second generation of that moment where it really is bottomless. I mean, the ocean of misinformation and half-truth and misunderstanding is bottomless. And
like, you have to ground this out in better examples. Otherwise, you guys are going to be doing that thing where you're having like a meta conceptual conversation, but in actuality, you are very far apart from each other without establishing that. But maybe he'll get there. Maybe he's just trying to start off nice. Because Peterson would agree, oh yeah, there's so much misinformation about there. It's all spread by the mainstream media and the left. It's like, okay, well.
Tools we have built to rectify misunderstandings and to spot lies and to be better truth seekers are there, but they have been, in some sense, this is asymmetric warfare. They're no match for the information waste product that can be produced more quickly, right? I mean, this is just the old
Well, it's
problem.
easier to produce noise than signal, obviously.
Yeah, or pseudo signal. Yeah, I mean, there's so much that purports to be signal, right? I mean, and again, this is probably socially more inconvenient for you than it is for me. But I mean, many of your bedfellows or former bedfellows, are the principal parts of this problem. I mean, they're the gods and goddesses on this landscape. I'm thinking of someone.
Okay, now we've grounded it out. Okay, so he was trying to start off nice. Okay, sorry, I want to see when it switches up again. Okay,
waste product that can be produced more quickly, right? I mean, this is just the old
Well, it's
problem.
easier to produce noise than signal, obviously.
Yeah, or pseudo signal. Yeah, I mean, there's so much that purports to be signal, right? I mean, and again, this is probably socially more inconvenient for you than it is for me. But I mean, many of your bedfellows or former bedfellows are the principal parts of this problem. I mean, they're the gods and goddesses on this land.
Okay, pivot, blame the mainstream media. Pivot, blame the left. Pivot, blame the mainstream media. Pivot and blame the left. Can he do it? Let's go.
I'm thinking of someone like Candace Owens, who's quite literally trafficking in blood libels now on her incredibly popular podcast. I mean, she's just gone berserk as far as I can tell. And yet, what is the style of conversation that would disconfirm all of that for her audience? At this point, I don't know, because I think what's happened is we've trained up a culture of people or cultures of people that simply don't care about facts. Really, they want a story that aligns with their, in some sense, their confirmation bias. I mean, they have certain things they want to believe. There's certain ideas they like the taste of, and then they just want people catering to that appetite, and there's a good business in that.
I know as a clinical psychologist that any given teenager is going to fall prey to peer pressure from time to time.
That's why he's going to buy your training course.
If you listen hard enough, people are likely to tell you everything.
Our son, who's in 7th grade, he's starting to fall in with a bad friend group.
Teenagers are desperate to fit in and obviously desperate to have friends and not to be the isolated target of exclusion and bullying.
How do we as parents get involved and engaged?
The reason people don't have these sorts of conversations is because they don't want the emotion. And the longer you let it go on, the more mess you're going to have to clean up.
Our daughter was bullied at her school.
How do we protect our kids when this is happening?
Don't let your kids drift away when they're teenagers. They don't want to, but they will if you don't pay attention.
Wow. Parenting with Jordan Peterson.
Well, part of that, I think, is the consequence of the fact that we have to ground our perceptions in an axiomatic framework. And I mean, this has been my concern with the primacy of the story right from the beginning.
What? Okay.
And I think the deeper question is, is there some necessary structure to that fundamental axiomatic framework? The postmodernist claim was that the fundamental postmodernist claim is that
there we go. Pivot, yes, pivot left. Talk about that. Okay, that's gonna be nothing. We'll see if Sam Harrison's gonna back on track. Strap in. We're about to get a 7-minute yap session where he says "fuck all."
Is no uniting meta-narrative, right? We live in the postmodern world now. The postmodern world is a place of local truths. And the French intellectuals, they not only decided that was necessary and an improvement, and now we see the consequences of that. We're in a landscape of infinite narratives, and the question is, how do you define a rank order of narratives such that some are valid and some are invalid. The idea of misinformation is obviously predicated on the notion that certain narratives are invalid, and that seems self-evident to me. I wouldn't exactly call myself a fan of the direction that Candace Owens has decided to walk down, but I'm not going to say anything more about her. And so, what I've been trying to struggle with is, and this has been the basis of many of our discussions in the final analysis, is what is the proper grounding for a narrative framework? And my understanding of your position is that that's why you've turned right from the beginning to the world of objective fact, so to speak. But the problem is that there's a lot of facts, and which ones to prioritize and which ones to ignore is a very thorny question. And one of the things you referred to obliquely was that, well, when you and I were young, because we're about the same age, I think you're 4 years younger than me, we had narratives that united us as a culture. There was there were fewer people. There was more ethnic homogeneity, at least in the local environments in the world. There were information brokers that were extraordinarily powerful. The universities, the newspapers, the TV stations, the radio stations, and they weren't very easy to get access to, and they had gatekeepers, and at least some of the time those gatekeepers seemed meritorious as well as arbitrary.
Yes, blame the left. We're almost there.
It could easily
Blame the
be
mainstream media.
that the fragmentation of the landscape
We're
is a
almost
consequence
there.
of technological revolution.
Go ahead.
And also perhaps of the...
We're getting there.
Well, you had pointed to the irresponsibility of the participants in that landscape. I think it's also, or even more primarily, that they're flooded with information and finding it very difficult to keep up.
Well, they're also just not disposed to function by the old norms that the gatekeepers, and for all their faults, they had standards, right? The New York Times had a standard.
But Sam, those I agree with you. But I also would say that those institutions, the gatekeeping institutions, have also revealed themselves as catastrophically flawed in the last 5 to 10 years. I'm interested in your take on this. Like, you brought up October 7th and the rise of anti-Semitism, and I've been tracking that with a couple of friends of mine, and we've been spending a lot of time.
Don't do the Israel anti-Semitism. It's the most boring topic, and these two guys are going to agree on it for the worst fucking reasons. Please do anything besides this. Go to Ukraine, Russia instead, please. Not the fucking Israel shit.
Fighting it off in all sorts of ways, some of which are public and some of which aren't. And I'm appalled by it. What's happened in Canada on the anti-Semitic front since October 7th is something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. It embarrasses me to the core. My goddamn government came out the other day, those bloody liberals, and they talked in the aftermath of October 7th about combating Islamophobia, as if that's Canada's problem, which it isn't. And so, and then, you saw what happened across the United States and Canada with regard to the universities, Columbia University in particular, and their absolute silence and complicitness while these terrible demonstrations were going on. Not that I think that the demonstrations themselves should have been, well, we can talk about that. Letting terrorist radicals take over the...
This is 20 minutes and we've talked about nothing. What a waste of time. What's happening?
Universities doesn't strike me as a very good solution. So I'm curious about what you think about that, because... Well, so like, I think the gatekeepers have abandoned the gates. Like, I don't trust anything the New York Times prints at all. I think they're reprehensible. The universities, I think, are beyond salvaging. I can't see how they can be fixed. Anyways, man, lay it out. Tell me what you think.
I think those all the way up until those last two statements, I can sign on the dotted line. I think all of these institutions have embarrassed themselves in recent years, and for the reasons that I think you and I would fully agree about. This became most obvious during COVID, but it's the October 7th is more the same. But I would just point out that the antidote to that, to the failures of institutions, is not new standards. It's really to apply the old standards. I mean, we need the institutions.
Spoken like a true conservative.
Yeah, fine. Well, the antidote to failures of science, say, or scientific fraud, is not something other than science. It's just more science, real science, good science, scientific integrity. And so it is with journalism or any academic discipline or anything that purports to be truth-seeking. We have standards, and there's nothing wrong with our standards. But what's dangerous about the current information landscape, where we have just this contrarian universe, where anything that is outside the institutions is considered to have some kind of primacy, right? Where everyone is kind of a citizen journalist, a citizen scientist, where you're just going to flip the mics on and talk for 4 hours, and that's good enough. What that's selecting for are the people who have no standards to even violate, right? I mean, these people are incapable of hypocrisy. I mean, one thing that's good about the New York Times and Harvard and any other institution you would point to that has obvious egg on its face at the moment is that, at a minimum, they're capable of being shamed by their own hypocrisy. And the people who aren't, I would agree with you that there's been some institutional capture where we have people in those institutions who just shouldn't be there, right? But we would make that judgment, again, by reference to these old standards of academic or journalistic integrity. But Candace Owens just doesn't have that, right? And sorry to beat up on her exclusively. I can move to other names if you want, but I mean, she's
no, it's not. It's the reason that I don't. The reason that I'm not inclined to discuss her isn't because I agree with what she's doing. It's because
I'm too much of a coward to actually call out anybody and stake any actual solid claims. It's not just me shitting on the left constantly.
I think the best way to deal with what she's doing is not to discuss
notice her. Okay, but
the best way to deal with what she's doing is not to discuss her. Okay, true. Yeah, sure.
Same thing about Tucker Carlson, right? And you might, whether you agree with me or not, this is my view of him. That he's not in the...
No, he won't talk bad about Tucker Carlson either. He's a fucking conservative dick suck on everything.
The truth-seeking, journalistic integrity business. He's got some other political project that entails spreading a fair amount of misinformation, quite cynically and consciously, and smearing lots of people. And in the case of, I don't know how deep his anti-Semitism runs, but in the case of that particular topic, midwifing a very misleading conversation with an amateur historian who he considers the greatest historian working in America today, Daryl Cooper, the podcaster. And the opinion expressed, again, this is at the highest possible level in our information ecosystem, to the largest audience. Few historians in human history have ever had a bigger audience than Daryl Cooper had on Tucker's podcast, and then quickly followed by his appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, right? And on that podcast, he spread the lie, that the recycled David Irving point, that the Holocaust is not at all what it seemed, and you wouldn't believe it, but the Nazis really never intended to kill the Jews. They just rounded up so many prisoners in their concentration camps and found that they just didn't have enough food during winter to feed them, and they just were put in this just impossible situation, and it might not seem more compassionate to euthanize these starving prisoners in the end, right? That's how they accidentally stumbled into the final solution, right? That's what he spread, again, to the largest possible audience. And in Tucker's case, you had a very I would say, sinister midwifing of that conversation. In Joe's case, he just doesn't know when he's in the presence of recycled David Irving, and is just happy to have a conversation with a podcaster of whom he's a great fan. And but yet he's still culpable for not having done enough homework to adequately push back about what's being said to his audience, which is the largest podcast audience on earth. So it's journalistically, and I know Joe doesn't consider himself a journalist, he considers himself a comedian, it's just having fun conversations, great, but what that is tantamount to at this moment, especially in the context of the worst eruption of anti-Semitism we've ever seen in our lifetimes globally, that's tantamount to taking absolutely no responsibility for the kind of information that is flowing unrebutted into the ears of your audience, right? That's why I got angry at Joe, right? I love Joe.
Well, what do we do? So we have to make an excuse for it and then pivot off of this as quickly as possible. People are trying their best. I'm trying to think if Jordan Peterson's Israeli simpness is going to actually lead him to criticizing Daryl Cooper, or if his obsession with maintaining all good alternative media, or all of the alternative media he likes, is going to mean that he won't criticize them at all. I wonder. I don't know what his position is on that.
Joe's a great person. He's completely in over his head on topics of that sort, and it has a consequence. It has an effect.
Getting the most out of life means being prepared for whatever comes your way, but many of us don't realize that a simple will doesn't actually cover all aspects of estate planning. There are crucial elements that need separate attention. That's where Trust and Will steps in to help ensure your loved ones are fully protected in every situation. Right now, you can visit trustandwill.com/Peterson to get 20% off their simple, secure, and expert-backed estate planning services that cover all your essential bases. The process is straightforward and free of complicated legal jargon, so you can complete your estate planning from the comfort of your own home. Knowing your assets and final wishes are properly documented and legally protected can give you peace of mind so that you can focus on living your life fully, knowing your loved ones will be taken care of, and according to your exact wishes. Plus, their website is incredibly user-friendly and simple to navigate, making the whole process super straightforward. What's particularly reassuring is that your personal information and documents are protected with bank-level encryption for maximum security. Each will or trust they create is tailored specifically to your state's laws and your individual needs, covering everything from care wishes and guardian nominations to final arrangements and power of attorney documents. It's no wonder they have an overall rating of excellent and thousands of 5-star reviews on Trustpilot. We can't control everything, but Trust and Will can help you take control.
Well,
future. Head over to trustandwill.com/Peterson for 20% off. That's 20% off at trustandwill.com/Peterson.
Well, one of the problems, I suppose, in some ways, Sam, is that in this new information landscape, we're all in over our heads.
Yeah, but some of us are alert to that possibility and worried.
Why was he even taking notes if you're not going to respond to anything that's being said? What an empty, hollow, meaningless fucking statement. Well, actually, it's all of us.
In this new information landscape, we're all in over our heads.
Yeah, but some of us are alert to that possibility and worried about it and taking steps to course correct and notice our errors, apologize for those errors.
Okay, whatever, Sam. Oh my God. Let me just say random shit, please.
Well, let's also try to make a distinction here. I mean, there is a distinction that's important to make between accidentally wandering into pathological territory, and causing
accidentally wandering into pathological territory. Like, what are these sayings? What are these statements?
Disruption because of the magnification of your voice, and there's a big difference between that and exploiting the fringe for your own self-aggrandizement. And there's plenty of the latter online. And I've been concerned for some substantial amount of time that online anonymity also drives that. I mean, you talked about the utility of embodied interaction in separating the wheat from the chaff, right? So one of the things you see online is, as you pointed out, if you have a crazy idea, you can find 300 other people who have even a crazier idea of the same sort, and you can get together with them, which you couldn't have done 20 years ago because there's only one of them per 100,000 scattered all around the world, but they can aggregate together quite quickly online. The places that females gather online, for example, are rife with that kind of pathology, and all sorts of psychogenic epidemics spread.
What? Oh, because he's trying to tie it to the trans shit, I think. Oh, okay, good, yes.
Together with them, which you couldn't have done 20 years ago because there's only one of them per 100,000 scattered all around the world, but they can aggregate together quite quickly online. The places that females gather online, for example, are rife with that kind of pathology, and all sorts of psychogenic epidemics spread without any barrier whatsoever in consequence.
Meanwhile, Peterson is literally crying in tears anytime somebody talks to him about young men because of how destroyed all young men. Oh, young men are fucking destroyed. No problems there, or maybe the women are causing it, based.
And women in particular are susceptible to psychogenic epidemics. And so that's a huge problem. It's also the case that in real world conversation, if I'm talking to you, you know it's me. And I have to live with the consequences of what I've said to you, assuming we ever meet again. And I have to live with the fact that other people hear about it as well. But if I'm anonymous, then I can say whatever the hell I want. I can gather the fruits of that, and I can dispense with any of the responsibility. And so my sense is that online connectivity magnifies our voice to a degree that it's virtually impossible to be responsible enough to conduct ourselves appropriately because the reach is just so great. And anonymity literally gives the edge to the psychopaths, predators, and parasites. And this is a huge problem. As a biologist, we can think about it as biologists for a moment, Sam. I mean, I would say two things. When the cost of communication is zero, the parasites swarm the system, right? Because the communication is a resource, and abandoned resources attract parasites. And what is it now? 50% of internet communication is bots. And a huge part of the reason for that is that communication is free. But it's not free, right? Because you have to attend to it. It actually has a cost. So the price of free is the wrong price. Let me give you an example of this. Just tell me what you think about this.
Oh boy, an example. Are we going to ground this out in a real-world political example, or are we going to find a way to ground it out in an example that either shits on the left or is meaningless?
Things I've done recently with my daughter and her husband, mostly, and a bunch of professors, is start this Peterson Academy. And
we're just going to plug our shit, okay.
We have an online social media element to that, which tracks about 15,000 regular users. And we keep a pretty close eye on it. And we refunded the money of 10 of our students because they were causing trouble on the social media platform. 10 out of 15,000. That's all. And it markedly improved in their absence. And so, there's an interesting dynamic there. We don't know what online anonymity does. We don't know what free communication does when the actual price isn't zero. It certainly serves the parasites extraordinarily well. And we are learning that bad information is easier to generate and spread than good information, right? None of this is personal, right? None of this really. I know we've already talked about the fact that all of this, what would you say, edgy conversation can be monetized and used to attract attention towards bad actors. Let's leave that aside. I agree with that completely. I think it's appalling. But there are structural problems here that are even deeper. And I think, well, anonymity is a huge problem. But then also I think, well, what the hell are we going, what kind of world would we define and live in rapidly if every bloody thing that you had to say online was verified with a digital identity? I mean, they've taken a lot of steps in that direction in China. That doesn't look very good to me.
Well, I think the structural problems run even deeper because I agree with everything you said about the effect of free and the effect of anonymity. And I draw two lessons from your experience with your online forum. One is that having it behind a paywall made it much cleaner than it otherwise would have been. You only found 10 people you had to kick out to clean the whole thing up. But the other point is that those 10 people can really have an outsized toxic influence on a larger culture. So I think we want social media platforms that draw that kind of lesson. But it's not just anonymity, and it's not just people who are grifting or otherwise incentivized to be liars or spreaders of misinformation. There are people who, with reputations, you would think they would want to protect. I mean, people with real, the biggest possible reputations and the biggest possible careers, who, in the presence of social media, have gone properly nuts. And I would, put as patient zero for this contagion, Elon Musk, right? I mean, Elon has, I've witnessed a complete unraveling of the person I knew.
Nope. Sorry, Peterson won't discuss this either. He's going to jump off this and pivot off this.
And I believe I knew him fairly well, under the pressure of extraordinary fame and wealth, but really kind of weaponized by his addictive entanglement with Twitter. I mean, he was so addicted to Twitter that he needed to buy it so that he could just live there. Right?
Yep,
I mean, that was
true.
Twitter was his whole life before anyone heard about his impulse to buy it, or anyone heard about his concern about the woke mind virus. I mean, but before COVID, he had gone off the deep end into Twitter being everything.
How do you know this? Like, I'm not disputing this.
I know this because I was his friend at the time, and.
How do you know that? He doesn't know anything about the relationship between Sam Harris and Elon Musk? I'm so curious, what does Peterson do with all of his free time? I need to figure out how these guys live, because he's like living his best retirement life. He doesn't read or research anything. He doesn't follow any news at all. I don't even think he posts that much on social media. He's not working as a psychotherapist, psychologist, whatever the fuck. He doesn't do research. Like, what does he actually do with all of his fucking free time?
I was there, in his very close social circle when, Twitter was causing obvious problems for his life and his businesses. When he would tweet, 420, funding secured, right, and the SEC, raised the offices of Tesla and seizes everyone's computer, right? I mean, he was screwing up his life through Twitter, and yet it was unthinkable that he would get off of it. So potent a drug was it for him.
Let me ask you about that. Let's think about this biologically again.
Oh my God.
One of the ways you can define addiction is as the pursuit of positive emotion that's bound to a very short time frame. So you get addicted when you optimize positive emotion over a very short time frame. So for example, the addictive propensity of cocaine is dependent on the dose, but also the rate of administration. So the reason that snorted cocaine or injected cocaine is more potent than the same dose of swallowed cocaine is because it crosses the blood-brain barrier faster and raises the dopaminergic pitch quicker. So there's rate and
also the reward component appears to correlate subjectively not with the peak in actual pleasure of the resulting stimulus, but in the peak of the expectation that the pleasure is about to arrive.
Yeah. Well, the dopaminergic system is an expectation system. And cocaine. So here's what we have with social media, with the bots, with the AI algorithm optimizers, right? So this is what's happening. You see it happening to YouTube too. Is that the systems are optimized to grip attention, but the battle is for shorter and shorter. What would you say? For shorter and shorter durations of attentional focus. So the battle is not only for attention, but for the shortest possible amount of information that will grip the maximum amount of attention. Now, the AI systems are using reinforcement learning to determine how to optimize that. And that's driving that fragmentation. Like you can see it on YouTube because YouTube is tilted more and more towards shorts, like TikTok, right? These fragmentary bursts of maximally attractive information. And they could capitalize on rage because rage has a positive emotion element. Now, I want to put this into the context of what you said about Twitter. And you and I can have a conversation about X and Twitter that's personal as well. So you said, Elon got hooked on X and enough to buy it. And so let's assess that situationally and biologically. Now, I spent quite a bit of time on X. In fact, it's the social media platform that I've used personally the most. It's the one I'm most familiar with. And I would say it's been a very complex platform for me.
Hasn't it at various points convinced you that you should no longer use it? Haven't you gotten on and on?
Multiple times.
I learned that lesson exactly once, but it really did stick. I have not looked.
Yeah, well, that's partly what I want to talk to you about. I mean, so part of it is, I get a lot of my podcast guests and my ideas for podcast guests from X, because I follow about 2,000 people. But I'm very extroverted, and there's an element of impulsivity that goes along with extroversion. I'm very verbally fluent, and so I can think up new ideas in no time flat, and I'm likely to say them. And so it's very easy for me, if I'm on X, to react to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so
foot, meat, mouth.
Well, but it's a weird thing, because some of my impulsive moves, so to speak, which have gotten me in quite a lot of trouble, I'm not the least bit unhappy about. You cannot believe how much flack I got for tweeting out something arguably careless on October 8th.
What was that? I not being on Twitter, I never saw that. What was it?
I think I said, give him hell, Netanyahu.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. So that took like 8 months of cleanup work to deal with. Yeah. Seriously, it was not. It was, and I got kicked off X.
Yeah, you're not going to get any dispute from me about that. I mean, Netanyahu. Just to close the loop on that, Netanyahu is obviously a very polarizing figure and probably a fairly corrupt figure, and he's got lots of problems that have implications for Israeli politics. But I'm not convinced that even the perfect prime minister, who has no optical problems, you judge from our side, would have waged this war any differently. I don't know what they should have done differently at every stage along the way. I don't know that any other prime minister would have taken a different path.
Well, the situation to me looks like, and you tell me what you think about this, and then we'll go back to the problem of AI optimization of grip of short-term attention and the manner in which X in particular falls into that category. So my sense with the situation in Israel has been right from the beginning that Iran in particular would and has set up the situation. So if every single Palestinian was sacrificed in the most torturous possible manner to irritate, annoy, and destroy Israel and agitate the Americans, that would be 100% all right with Iran.
I think someone said that the mullahs in Iran will fight Israel to the last Arab. I think that's the line that captures.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly okay. That's exactly how it looks to me. And so I look at that situation and I say, well, I think, like, what do you do in a situation like that that's moral if you're Israel? Anyways, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too deeply. But so I've had this like complex relationship with X, and some of it's been real useful because I follow a lot of people there and I keep an eye on the main streams of the culture and I extract out my podcast guests and I can see where the real pathology is emerging and I can keep an eye on it. And the price of that is that, now and then I stick my foot in it in a major way, and sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not. And now I've sort of built a variety of fences around me that are part of my organization that, they're kind of these intermediary structures that we've been talking about that put a lag in between what I read and how I respond, Well, that's one, and this is it's the destruction of those things that you and I are starting to talk about here. Because, there's never been a time in human history where you could publish your first pass opinion about anything to 20 million people in 1 second, right? No one could ever do that. And we're not neurologically constructed to live in a world where you can yell at 10 million people whenever you want about anything.
Yeah, the problem for me is that what's happening now, going back to this core topic of what in particular is wrong with X, and it's the time course at which people are reacting to information and producing information in turn. There's a lot wrong with that, and what it's done to our culture, and what it's done to specific people. I mean, again, Elon for me is the enormous, the 800-pound canary in the coal mine. Is that it's effectively made them behave like psychopaths. I'm not saying, if you just look at X, and this is what convinced me to get off of it, you would think there were many more psychopaths in the world than there are in fact. I was seeing people who I knew in every other context would be psychologically normal, or at least normal enough, behave like psychopaths to me, toward me, in front of me, and in some cases these are people I actually knew. In some cases the people I had dinner with, and I knew what I was seeing on X would have been impossible across the table from me at dinner.
What if I told you there's a tiny nutrient missing from your body that could potentially change everything about how you feel? Well, if you've ever wondered why you're feeling sluggish, sleeping pills delivered quarterly.com. Interesting. Value 15, essential nutrition for healthier cells and a healthier you.
Right. And so that's an interesting definition of a pathological sub-environment, isn't it? Like, you can tell a family is pathological when the rules that apply in the family don't generalize to the outside world. And you're pointing out that the game dynamics of Twitter have that aspect. Is that the game that's being played in Twitter doesn't suit the world well. It's not an iterable game in the world. And it could easily be the fact that it maximizes for short-term emotional reactivity is exactly what gives it that psychopathic edge, because the definition of a psychopath in many ways is the person who will sacrifice the future and you for immediate gratification, right? That's the pathology of psychopathy as a form of extended immaturity.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of aggressive immaturity on display on X. And again, Elon is one of the primary offenders. One instance for me that made this especially clear, and the role played by X especially clear, was when he...
I guess maybe this is why nobody... I guess his videos don't do too well anymore, huh? They do okay, I guess. For having 8.7 million subs, and he doesn't post that frequently. It's just so boring. There's no way that there are... I guess it makes sense, the drop off, because nobody listens to it. You don't take anything from any of this. He's not saying anything ever. He's just like... He speaks with so little substance. It's actually... It's such a chore to listen to him. He says nothing. My God.
When he jumped up on stage during one of these campaign events, or...
How far are you on his popular tab? Oh, I have no idea. I mean, he did have a lot of popular videos way back in the day, so... I don't even remember how many... Oh, I guess I am pretty far up. 4.4 million views. Not bad. Jesus.
Or I forget if it was campaign or I guess the election had already been won, but some event with Trump, and Elon, quite infamously, did what appeared to be a Nazi salute twice to the crowd, and got a reaction from much of the world of horror and insult. And now, honestly, as his former friend and as somebody who just imagines his worldview has not fully disintegrated into a tissue of weird internet memes, it was impossible for me to believe that he was sincerely announcing his solidarity with the project of Nazism by making those salutes. Right? So I didn't view those as Nazi salutes, even though just ergonomically they were in fact Nazi salutes. I just thought, okay, I don't know what he's doing, but the idea that he's picking this moment to say I'm a Nazi seems frankly impossible. So I was interested to see what he was going to do in response to the controversy. What he did in response, and again, this controversy is coming in a context that doesn't look at all good for my very charitable interpretation of his behavior, because it's in a context where he's funding the far-right party in Germany, assuring us that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that party, whereas the party does in fact contain whatever Nazis there are to be contained in Germany. Not that it's only a Nazi party, but it is in addition to everything else, it's got the Nazis. He's playing footsie with lots of fairly aggressive anti-Semites on his own platform. With great fanfare, he brought back Nick Fuentes and Kanye, and these people are anti-Semites, if not actual Nazis. So he is facilitating a very unhappy recrudescence of anti-Semitism on the platform he owns, and now he's doing Nazi salutes in public. So what is a genuinely not anti-Semitic, well-intentioned person who cares about his reputation and is still capable of embarrassment do in the aftermath of this? Well, it would have been just trivially easy for him to have said something totally sensible and apologetic that would have been honest and would have taken the sting out of the moment perfectly. He could have said, "Listen, I know how that looked. I don't know what I was doing up there. I was just captured by the energy of the moment."
This seems incredibly obvious. Will Jordan Peterson respond with substance to any of this, or will he pivot off into some other random, crazy, wacky tangent again? Let's see.
Obviously, I was not doing a Hitler salute. I'm not a Nazi. I've got no interest in amplifying their message on X or anywhere else. If you're a Nazi, please don't follow me. I hate your whole project. You're completely wrong about everything, right? End of tweet, right? He did nothing like that. All he did was troll his audience, making Nazi jokes and puns on X. So you can fault his character for that, but what I also think we should fault is the medium itself, right? This is the way his brain is conforming to the technology.
Yes.
Oh, thank God.
You know the fundamental...
First, we should fault the media. Thank God, yes. Whoa. I don't want to criticize anybody on my side because I'm an actual, partisan cocksucker hack. Oh, thank God, yes. Just the medium.
Attribution error. It is why the one thing social psychology...
Fundamental attribution. Thank God. Let's get to some random fucking shit. Some random fucking shit that doesn't even make sense to bring up here. Fundamental attribution error has to do with the fact that we attribute malice or bad motivations to people's actions, but Sam Harris literally just said that people were doing that, and that's why Elon Musk could have very easily discouraged anybody from doing the fundamental attribution error by literally saying that he was sorry and he didn't mean to do it, and it would have literally dispelled all of this, but now we're going to do another random bullshit.
First, to the technology. Yes.
Well, look, you know the fundamental attribution error. It is why the one thing social psychologists have discovered that's actually valid. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but the fundamental attribution, yes, it does things. The fundamental attribution error is the proclivity to attribute to character what's actually a consequence of situation. In these, we should be very careful, and I think we are at the moment, be very careful to assure that our first presumption is that it's the pathology of the technology that's the fundamental driver.
Yeah,
and people are swept along in it.
That's my account of what has happened to Elon almost in its entirety. I think Twitter has he is the greatest living casualty of what Twitter does to someone who becomes properly engorged by it. And
please stop talking about Elon. Peter says, please, you're talking too specifically about a specific person and you're criticizing a guy and he's on my team, and please, can we move on? Peterson is so uncomfortable right now. I'm surprised he didn't just ban the topic of any right-wing person ever from this conversation. Don't bring up any right-wing person ever.
That's, so, and one of the reasons why I got off, frankly, was apart from my own misadventures on the platform, which was nothing like Elon's.
Nice.
I looked in the kind of the funhouse mirror of what was happening to him in his life, and I thought, here's a very smart guy who's got much better things to do than fuck up his life in this way, and he can't seem to stop. How much am I like him? How much is there this component of addiction and dysregulation and failures of impulse control, and a need to just get my thoughts out on a time course of seconds rather than more carefully, over the course of days. So then I yanked it for that reason. And one thing I found is that when you don't have it as an outlet, right, when you literally can't publish that quickly, then things have to survive a much larger informational half-life. So then there's this thing online that happened that I'm tempted to react to. It has to survive until I do my next podcast, which might not be for 3 or 4 days, right? And so, obviously 90% of the things I thought I had to react to don't survive that time course.
Yeah, I made a deal with my wife that was like that because, I can see things going sideways, I think, with a fair degree of accuracy, and that disrupts me emotionally now and then. And I made a deal with my wife several years ago that I can't complain about anything I won't write about. Right? Well, it's the same thing, and it bears on the same issue that you're describing, is that if it's not important enough to write about, then you should ignore it, right? It's not significant enough. It's not significant enough to sacrifice some genuine time and thought. You shouldn't be commenting on it. And that's kind of a maturity, but it's also, it's a weird thing because it's not exactly like, it isn't something that people had to contend with previously because you couldn't publish immediately. There were barriers of cost and difficulty and gatekeepers and distribution. And so that wasn't something you had to think up for yourself. Like, how do I put a lag in my life before I communicate with 1 million people or 5 million people? And so you're basically building these inhibitory structures out of whole cloth. And now you pulled out of Twitter quite a while ago now. It's a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So 2.5 years, something like that. It was actually right when Elon took it over, but it wasn't because he took it over. I mean, the timing there was fairly accidental. I was getting ready to pull the plug, and then I just saw how much chaos was being introduced into his life around it. And I just thought,
54 minutes. This has got to be the last one. Okay. I don't think I'm ever doing another Jordan B. Peterson video. Just wait till he dies. This is what a waste of time.
Right. This is a sign. And so I yanked it. And one of the benefits, apart from just introducing this different time course into my life by which I interact with information, I just don't there's this phrase, that Twitter isn't real life, and then at a certain point, many of us realize, okay, that's too sanguine a thought because we're noticing people losing their reputation so fully that they get on an airplane, like with the Justine Sacco incident, where she got on an airplane and half the world was tweeting about her, and she arrived at her destination only to find that she had been properly canceled and lost her job, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously Twitter can, whether you're on it or not, it can.
Was he always this long-winded? I don't think so. No, I feel like there's old JP videos you could listen to where he was saying things of substance.
Under the right circumstances or the wrong ones, become real life, but. The truth is, given the platform I've built, just frankly how lucky I've been to find an audience and to build up readership and podcast listenership, Twitter really isn't real life for me, right? Elon still attacks me on Twitter by name, and I find out I'm trending on Twitter, years after I've left, and it matters not at all for my life. It matters not at all for my business. Nothing happens, right? And yet, if I were on Twitter, there would be this illusion of emergency, right? If I was on there looking at it and looking at the biggest, literally the biggest bully on Twitter has just punched me in the face, and I'm seeing the aftermath of it, the temptation to respond to that and to make it and to feel that not only do I have to respond there, but I have to respond to my podcast, and then now this is how I'm spending my week because this thing just happened on Twitter. It would be almost impossible not to be taken in by that, and not to be just convinced of the necessity of it, because all of this is really important. We're talking about millions of people. Like literally, there are videos denigrating me for things I've never said or believed that Elon has amplified, and these videos have 50 million views, right? And I just happen to be lucky enough to have built a life and a career where that matters not at all, right? But for somebody else finding themselves in that situation, I can well imagine, all right, this is the destruction of my reputation in a way that matters. And
well, that's what it looks like, sure. And like you said, it's virtually impossible to resist that temptation. I mean, who are you to deny the impact of the opinion of 50 million people? You know what I mean?
What do you mean, who are you? You guys are media pundits. It's literally your fucking job. Why does he talk about people in his position like we're just ordinary people? This is our job. This is what we do. We sign up for it. We get paid a lot for it. Like, at the very least, the minimum amount of thing you should be able to do is resist the public temptation to just lie and lie and lie and lie and lie. Now, if you're talking about like an ordinary, it's so funny. It's so fucking funny because Peterson is actually operating, and if anybody wanted to call him out with substance, Peterson is actually operating, if you go to the fundamental attribution era, right? He's operating in the exact opposite manner that he should, because he will attribute no malice whatsoever to somebody like Elon Musk, who should know better, billionaire, older guy, multi-CEO of multiple successful companies, huge influence on the world and exposure to social media and everything. He should know. And what is Peterson say about that? Oh, that's a pathology. He can't help it. But then when it comes to college kids, these are evil people. These are postmodernist evil people who are trying to destroy the world, and they're satanic, and they're trying to ruin everything. And it's like, if anything, it should be the exact opposite. Kids are fucking retarded. No offense, but they are. Kids are retarded. They say retarded shit all the time. Why do we have no standards of behavior for any of the larger social media figures who are on social media? Like, it's ridiculous.
I mean, that looks like an insane pride in a way to ignore that. But the point that you're making is that it's very difficult to
well, it's very easy to ignore it when it actually isn't making contact with my views. Right? It's like if I said
right, but it's hard to see that it isn't, because it appears so powerful. We found as a social media platform that Twitter is the worst of all social media platforms for sales conversion.
Yeah, I can imagine.
In our experience,
because you're next to somebody getting beaten to death in a liquor store. I mean, like when I go on Twitter, since I don't have an account, so I have a naive account. It's not following anyone, and I almost never click anything. So I really see this as a pure algorithm when you just look at the homepage scroll, and or as pure as it gets. I mean, maybe it's got some information on me based on my IP address or something. But if I ask myself, what is this algorithm trying to get me to be or to believe? Honestly, I can tell you that it is trying to get me to be a racist asshole. Right? And any fan of Elon's. Right? So it's giving me a lot of Elon, and then it's giving me a lot of like black teenagers beating up white, a single white teenager, or people of color robbing stores and getting shot in the face. I mean, it's just awful, like 4chan level awfulness. And then the occasional unlucky brand advertising to me in that context. I mean, it's a monstrosity of a platform from which to actually try to sell things. So but yes, if I were on Twitter following 2,000 smart people as you are and feeling that they are curating for me, the best of their information diet, I would have. I know what that experience is like because that's what I was doing. That's why I was on it for 12 years and couldn't convince myself to get off it. It seemed like professional necessity. It seemed so good in the sense the incoming stuff was so good because again I had chosen who to follow and all these people were reading great articles and forwarding them and having great short takes on them, and it was all that stuff was great. But I have managed to get a surrogate of that in the way I find information otherwise. And what I don't have is the emergency. Like, I mean, the ruined vacation where somebody, some genius over at the New York Times has called me a racist, and now I have to, spend the rest of my vacation with my family trying to figure out how to respond to this. I've tweeted back at them and blah, 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 blah. It's escalated, and now we've just nuked each other. And
it looks real.
Yeah, it looks real, but it feels real, and it is real if you spend your time that way. And that's the thing. If you spend your time that way, which I did for years, it is real. It is the substance of your life. It is the manner in which it's the thing you bring back to the conversation with your wife, 5 minutes later or 5 hours later, more likely, and it's in your head. And it was a ghastly use of attention. That's what I finally realized.
There's been some concerning research about the true safety of the abortion pill that's worth discussing. A recent report suggests that about 60 health emotional needs will also opt they'll choose to support.
Well, you made an allusion when you were talking about what you regard as the unfortunate effect of X on Elon and maybe on other users. So let's assume that you were afraid that the sort of things that you were seeing happening to others, more than merely Elon, let's say, in your estimation, were also happening to you. And so what do you think, in retrospect, what do you think it was doing to you? You just talked about the effects on your family on vacations. I've experienced a fair bit of that. I understand exactly what you're saying. And it does seem like the world's burning and you better do something about it right now. And it's no wonder it seems that way because it's lots of people, and generally in our normative ecosystems, if lots of people appear to be upset with you or around you, you should pay attention. But Twitter isn't the real world. We don't know what the hell it is, It looks more and more like a world of demonic thoughts, and God only knows what that world is. But what did you see, especially now that you've been away for a while, what elements of your character do you think were pathologized and that were brought to the forefront?
Well, so first of all, I considered myself a fairly careful user of it. I mean, I was not at all like Elon. I was not addicted to it in that way. I was not tweeting hundreds of times a day. I think I averaged something like 3 tweets a day over the course of my use of it, and that would come in spurts. I mean, so I would not tweet for 3 days and then send out a dozen tweets, because it was some hot topic. I was always fairly careful, so that I honestly don't think I ever said anything on the platform that I regretted, right? I mean, if I ever made a mistake, I apologize for it. But I never, I treated it like writing. I was aware I was publishing in that channel, however quickly and impulsively. I was, I'm enough of a writer and an academic to feel like, okay, this is yet another occasion where embarrassment is possible, and you don't want that. So I don't remember ever really screwing up on the platform. And yet, what happened there was, I mean, I can honestly say that for a decade, the worst things in my life, and in some sense, the only bad things in my life, came from Twitter, came from my interaction with Twitter. I mean, apart from like family illnesses, I guess leaving that aside, my life was so good, and yet I had this digital serpent in my pocket that I would consult a dozen times a day, 20 times a day, maybe 100 times a day. So I might have only posted once or twice, but if something was really, if the news cycle was really churning, I might be looking at this my consulting of this newsfeed effectively. Was interrupting my day, not just every hour, but maybe every 5 minutes of many hours, right? Or for 10 minutes of that hour. And so it was segmenting my day, however good or productive that day was or should have been. I was constantly chopping it up by how I was engaging with this scroll. Again, mostly consuming, but often in response to the one or two things I put out. Yes, there was a dopaminergic component to that, obviously. I said something that I thought was clever, that was perceived as clever by my fans, and perhaps to the detriment of my enemies. And
what are these, like, I love how we've just been talking about the same shit the entire time, but they try to, like, timestamp it. So, like, 152, are we building new Towers of Babel? Did we really talk about that? No, we just said that social media or X can be a pathology. The rise of anti-Semitism, we didn't really talk about that at all. The lapse of standards, we didn't really talk about that at all. Elon Musk's addiction, is X a net negative? We didn't really talk much about that. Reflecting on the give him hell tweet, not really. Musk's salute, safeguards for impulse control, not really. How X breeds pathology in its users, that's kind of what we've been talking about the whole time. Like, holy shit.
All that seemed, exactly what I wanted in the moment. But even when it was at its best, right? Even when there was just good information coming to me and I was responding happily with good information back, even the non-toxic version of it was a style was intrinsically fragmenting of my life. It's like I don't read a book that way. I don't have a book that I pick up for 2.5 minutes and then I put down and then try to have a conversation with my kid and then say, okay, hold on 1 second, and pick up the book again. It's like that's not how anyone reads a book, right? And yet Twitter far too often became that sort of thing in my life.
Right.
And
it's like a parasite. It's like it parasitizes the exploratory instinct. It's something like that, right? Because and maybe look, for a long time, I didn't have a cell phone. I was a late adopter of cell phones, and I didn't watch the news probably really from like 1985 till about 2005. I cut myself off from news sources. I didn't read newspapers. And the reason that I didn't do that was because I realized...
happened in there. Did you catch 9/11?
I used to read, for example, I would read some credible magazines like The Economist when it still was credible, because I don't really think it is anymore. But
wasn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing to consider that magazines like...
The Economist is not very credible. Anyway, as part of the Daily Wire. Okay, dude.
Time and Newsweek, and they could wait a week. I could expect that their audience would wait a week to be informed about the news of that week. That just seems extraordinary to me now.
Well. My conclusion about that was that if it isn't important in a week, it's not important.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so I substituted these longer lag time news aggregators for TV in particular, or radio. It's like, if it's today's news, it's not news. Maybe if it's not important in a month, it's not news, right? And that's part of that intelligent filtering. And I guess part of the reason that X is dangerous and social media is dangerous, X in particular, is that that proclivity to forage for information is in general an extremely useful instinct, right? It's the instinct to learn. But what we're learning, you might say that the shorter the period of time over which the information is relevant, the more like pseudo-information it is. And so then any system that optimizes for the grip of short-term attention is going to parasitize your learning instinct with pseudo-information.
We've already talked about that. Like, I feel like Peterson has had the same conversation, and he's like getting so high on his own farts over and over again. Like, social media is bad for us.
Information.
Yeah, it's also...
And the algorithms are going to maximize that.
The half-life is one thing, but also the culture that is informing these algorithms, the actual human behavior that the algorithms are skimming and boosting, is increasingly a bad faith style of conversation. I mean, it's just so many people, especially the anonymous people, are in the misinformation business. I mean, they will just cut together a clip that is designed to mislead, and that is the clip that will get spread to the ends of the earth.
Well, maybe is it designed to mislead, or is it designed to optimize their particular grip on short-term attention for their own aggrandizement? Like the psychopathic move, and let's say that it's facilitated by these short-term attention aggregators that are driven by bots that are learning how to do this. The psychopathic proclivity, the narcissistic proclivity, is going to say whatever puts you at the center of attention, whatever it is. Now, if you're governed by some kind of ethos that is outside of attention seeking, then that's a different story. But if the game is that the machine optimizes for short-term attention, then it's going to reward all the players that are doing whatever it takes to grip short-term attention.
Yeah, but the thing is, people, whatever it takes, though, is to get somebody seeming to say something totally outrageous. And in context, it might have made perfect sense, or at least be a very different point than the one that's being advertised by the clip. But the clip, short of context, is calculated to mislead in that the person who's edited that clip knows that the naive viewer can only draw one conclusion from the utterance as presented, right? And they're not even if they're well-intentioned and fairly alert to this problem, almost no one is going to go back to the original podcast and look at the comment in context. I mean, this just happened to Rogan, I believe. I think he had Bono, the singer for U2 on his podcast, and Bono said something critical of Elon, I believe, and this.
Do you think that Sam is doing a bad job of bringing the conversation back to a single topic? How does one do that effectively? I mean, he's doing the best he can. The reality is that pussies like Peterson will never have challenging conversations. So if you ever want to bring these guys on your show or have talks with them, you have to basically agree to sit around in a little circle and pat each other on the backs and be so gentle and nice to each other and never challenge anybody significantly on any opinion, because these people are modern day fucking sophists or whatever the fuck you call them.
This got chopped up in a clip that was just, it made it look like Joe really disagreed
It's
with...
not even sophistry. It's just fucking spineless echo hackery. I don't know. Like, Sam is trying to push a little bit. I mean, like, I'm not saying it's necessarily Sam's fault, but like, Peterson is very clearly like, I am not going to criticize or engage in any critical political thought at all, period. Like, I'm only here to repeat the same three talking points that I've been repeating like for the past 5 years, which is something about social contagion and social media and pathology of social media and a bunch of irrelevant Bible analogies or allusions, and that's it, over and over and over and over again. That's it. It's just fucking
Bono and was critical of him, and the clip just got exported as like, look at Bono getting owned by Joe Rogan or whatever. But that's not what the conversation was at all, right? Like Joe conceded, had most of the point that Bono was making. It was false. It was a false picture of what happened there. And the person who makes that clip just knows that if they frame it as a smackdown, people are going to love to see that, and it doesn't matter that they're lying about what happened and damaging people's reputations in the process.
Yeah, well, and that's especially true if they're anonymous and their reputation bears no consequence of their lies. Well, the other thing that's happening, I don't know how much this is happening to you, and this is another example of the parasite problem. So increasingly, my voice and my image are being used not exactly in the way that you're describing, although that's happening a lot.
Yeah, I'm selling cognitive enhancers somewhere as an AI version of myself.
Okay, well, that's happening a fair bit too, and sometimes worse than cognitive enhancers. But the worst thing that's happening now is that these sites that are operating under my name, using my image and my voice, are providing pseudo-philosophical content and pseudo-psychological insight as if
like exactly what you do.
It's me. And so it's like what I've said has been put through a filter of stupidity and reorganized in my voice. And this is happening constantly. Like YouTube is
every single show that I have that it shows on my channel is this is happening. Finally, Peterson gives us an honest take on his content.
Using my image and my voice are providing pseudo-philosophical content and pseudo-psychological insight as if it's me.
Yes.
And so it's like what I've said has been put through a filter of stupidity and reorganized in my voice.
Yes.
And this is happening constantly. Like YouTube has already taken 65 channels down that are doing this. And so this is another example of that parasite problem, right? You store up a reputation and then the parasites swoop in and pull off the attention that the reputation has garnered and monetize it, and they can escape into the ether because they do it anonymously. And so this is going to become like a stunning problem.
I mean, it's a big problem. I can see that the perfect version of it is at most a year away. I mean, it might only be a couple of months away. We've experimented with this on our side too. Just like, for instance, in my meditation app, Waking Up, we're now experimenting with translation to other languages, and AI's got me speaking 22 languages perfectly in my voice, and it really sounds like me speaking those languages. And the translation, from what we can tell so far, is fairly impeccable. So we're going to roll out a Spanish version of the app in the not too distant future just to see what happens. But it's getting too good. So I think what the lesson that consumers of information who care to have real information are going to have to learn is that you can't trust, if you're looking at Jordan Peterson on YouTube, you simply cannot trust that it really is Jordan Peterson unless it's coming through one channel that you can trust. Which is, so we're back to the age of, ironically, we're back to the age of gatekeepers, right? It's not on your channel or Joe Rogan's channel or Chris Williamson's channel. If it just purports to be them, but on somebody else's YouTube account, you can't trust it.
Yeah. Well, it might also be, Sam, that the real solution to that is payment. Like if it's the rule is going to be, maybe this is the rule. The rule is going to be, if it's free, right? If it's free, it's a lie.
Right. Yeah.
That's the world we're rapidly moving into. Or if it's
someone's going to be able to create, until you find them and stop them, someone will create the fake Jordan Peterson Academy that has a paywall, right? It looks like you, sounds like you, and it's only $5 a month, and so they'll monetize that way, and that'll still be the problem.
Has that been happening with your meditation app, with your enterprise yet?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I just think I'm just aware of seeing short clips of me seeming to hawk psychotropics that I've never heard of, and it's just like an AI version of my voice. It's real footage of me stolen from somebody's podcast, and then an AI workover of that that turns into like an Instagram ad.
Yeah, well, I talked to some lawmakers in D.C. about a year and a half ago about the fact that this was going to happen, hoping that they would. Well, it takes a long time to take notice and take action, but it's essentially the digital equivalent of kidnapping. Like, I think people should be put in prison for a long time for stealing your digital identity and monetizing it. Like, it is very much akin to kidnapping, because what they're doing is they're draining the value out of your reputation. That's essentially the game, And so what's happened to your life? There's a couple of things I'd like to investigate here first. The first is I'd like to return to something that you and I talked about that we wandered around a fair bit in our previous conversations. You had partly because you were concerned about the distinction between good and evil. Don't let me put words into your mouth. You were hoping to find a objective basis for morality, a way of grounding morality in the objective world. And I have a thought about that that's relevant to our current conversation. So tell me if you accept this proposition. Part of the pathology of Twitter is that it operates by game rules that not only don't apply in the real world, but that when exported to the real world, pathologize it. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like
So here's a way of I think bridging a gap between the way you've been thinking about the world from the moral perspective and the way I've been thinking about it. So You know, I've always been, I've understood that you had a very deep concern about moral judgment, and that your attempt to provide a scaffolding of objectivity for morality was grounded in that even deeper concern. And I thought that I could understand why you did that. And I didn't agree with the conclusions that you draw, but I agreed with the overall enterprise. And it struck me recently, and I think we've already obliquely made reference to it in our conversation, that there's another way of conceptualizing this relationship between morality and objective fact, and that it might be more fruitful to look into the realm of something like, well, it's like theory of iterability, and generalizability. It's maybe a variant of something like game theory. Like, imagine that. So let me give you an example, Sam. It's a pretty famous example. You know those trading games where behavioral economists sit people down and say to people, they say, I'll give you $100, you have to make an offer to them. Okay.
Yeah.
So the finding across culturally is that people generally approximate a 50% split, right?
Yeah. And they're not game theoretic with respect to unfair trades. Like they don't want to accept unfair trades even when it would just narrowly be to their advantage to accept them.
Exactly. Okay. And that's true even if they're poor. So if you put a poor person in a situation where they have to accept an unfair trade, that would be to their immediate economic benefit. They seem even less likely to accept it. Now, I think the right way to construe that is that if you and I engage in an economic trade, we're doing two things at the same time. The first is what the classical economists would say is we're trying to maximize our gain, let's say. But the problem with that notion is that we aren't playing one game. Or while we're playing one game, we're also setting ourselves up to play a very large and unpredictable sequence of games. Those are happening at the same time. And so we don't want to just optimize for gain in a single game. We want to optimize our status as players in a large series of unpredictable games. And so we want to put ourselves forward as fair players so that people line up to play other games with us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then imagine that the hallmark of morality is something like generalizable iterability across contexts, right? Because this would allow for, and so you could think about a truly moral system is the most playable game. And an immoral system augurs in. And like when we're talking about this to some degree with regard to X, because our proposition is that fundamentally, because it's optimizing for short-term attention grip, and it benefits the psychopaths and the short-term gain accruers, the parasites, and perhaps the predators, that it's fundamentally a non-playable game, and that if its consequences generalize outside the world of X, that it pathologizes the environment. And the reason for that is it's not optimally iterable. And so the pattern of morality that would be grounded in the objective world isn't in the world of objective fact. It's in the world of optimized iterability across people and contexts.
Well, I would say that there's some set of objective facts that subsumes that picture, right? I mean, the world is the way it is. The social world of social primates such as ourselves is the way it is. It admits of certain possibilities, and certain other things are impossible given the kinds of minds we have. Our minds could change in all kinds of ways. They could change by being integrated with technology. They could change by genetically being manipulated at some point in the future. There's this landscape of possible experience that the right sort of minds could navigate. And we're someplace on that landscape, and we're trying to find our way. And so I view morality as at bottom, a navigation problem, right? And it's got this iterative quality that you described. The question is, it's always, where can we go from here? Where should we go from here? Where should we go from here, given all the possible places we might go from here, both individually and collectively?
Okay, well, the reason that I got obsessed with stories to begin with, Sam, was because I realized 30 years ago that a story was a description of a navigation strategy.
Wow.
That's what a story is.
Okay.
And so then the question is, okay, let's see if we can formalize this a bit more. The story has to, let's say an optimized story has to iterate and improve. So, for example, if you construe your marriage properly, it exists stably, but that's not as good as it could get. It could exist stably and improve as it iterates. And then you can imagine that there's a small world of games that are playable in the actual natural and social world that improve as they iterate. And those games, pointers to those games are moral pointers. And I think that that's what the core of the religious enterprise dives into and elaborates upon. I think that's what makes it the religious enterprise, is that it deeply assesses. So if, imagine that your proposition you laid out is accurate, is that the fundamental concern is navigation. How do we get from point A to point B? Well, a story, you can think about this and tell me what you think, but I believe that a story is a description of a navigation strategy. If you go see a movie, you infer the aim of the protagonist, and you adopt his perceptual frame and his emotional perspective. That's how perception works. And then you can imagine that there are depths of games, some are shallow, and short-term games that maximize for short-term gain, and to hell with everything else, are shallow. And games that are sophisticated can be played in many situations with many players. They take the future into account, and they improve as you play them. And there's a hierarchy of value in consequence of that is obliquely associated with the world of fact, because it has to operate in the world of fact, but that isn't fundamentally derived from data that's directly associated with the facts.
Well, not operationally, but potentially so, just not in fact. That's just not. I'm never claiming when I say that there are objective truths to all of these questions that those objective truths will be delivered by some guy holding a clipboard wearing a white lab coat. But they're things we just know to be true, and it would take a lot of explaining to get to the bottom of how we know them to be true. But I mean, just they're very simple claims. We know that life in the best and most refined and most ethically positive some developed world context, right? You and me and our most conscientious friends at the nicest resort after having done a great day's work, we're enjoying a great meal and talking creatively and positively about how to improve the world. We know that's a better game than trying to find some child soldiers to torture the neighbors in some malarial hellhole in sub-Saharan Africa so that we can extract some heavy metals, the extraction of which is polluting the environment and causing the life expectation to be 30 years lower than it is in where we live, right? And so there are different, fundamentally discordant human projects that are available to some very lucky people and unavailable to others, and luck is by no means evenly distributed in this world. So there are better and worse games, right? By any measure of better, you want to ethically better, artistically better, entrepreneurially better, economically better. It's just better with respect to the health outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. So we're all trying to play the best game we can be a part of. We're all trying. I mean, some people. I take that back. Many of us are. We're all trying to play the best game we can think of as best. But one of the consequences of my argument is that it's possible to be wrong. It's possible to actually have false beliefs about what is in fact better or worse. Like you can be
well,
confused,
I also think you're insufficiently pessimistic too, Sam. I think because I don't think everyone is trying to play the best possible game. I think that there are truly negative games where
no,
I think
people are being rewarded in some way. Like the sadist whose favorite game is to just to cause suffering in others and enjoy that suffering. The fact that he enjoys their suffering, right? That's a problem with him, right? He's a neurological monster of a sort, and he's confined to being the sort of mind that finds that very low level game more rewarding than the game I just advertised at the resort with us being creative and productive and positive sum.
Yeah, well, that's the man who wants to rule over hell, Sam.
Right. Yeah. So
right.
I'm not
because he thinks. Okay. Fine.
But my point is that we're obviously living in a realm where there are better and worse outcomes by any definition of better and worse that makes sense.
Even from within the confines of the games that you're describing.
Yeah.
Right. Because one of the ways of deciding that a game is counterproductive is that if you play it, it doesn't produce the result that it intends. Right. So that's another kind of universal hallmark of moral judgment. Like if you're aiming at something and your strategy doesn't get you there, either your strategy is wrong or your aim is off by your own definition. Right. There's no relativizing your way out of that. And then we could say, well, there's a hierarchy of games that expand and improve as you play them, and there's a hierarchy of games that degenerate as you play them, even by your own standards of degeneration.
Yeah, and the games, the more refined games, actually refine you as a player. I mean, you get changed by the game you play, to your advantage or to your disadvantage, and it makes you more or less capable of playing any specific game. So this is what learning, this is what education is, this is what skill learning is, this is what interpersonal skill learning amounts to, this is what the difference between having good relationships versus bad relationships, being in a good culture where its institutions incentivize you to be effortlessly to be the best possible version of yourself, as opposed to you having to be some kind of moral hero just to be just not a psychopath. And this is what's so important about incentives and about contexts like Twitter that incentivize the wrong things. But what we want, I mean, we don't want to have to take on the burden of rebooting civilization ourselves based on our own native moral intuitions every single hour of every single day.
That's for sure, Sam. That's for sure.
We need systems that make it easy for strangers to collaborate effortlessly in high trust environments, right? I mean, we need to offload all of our moral wisdom into institutions and to systems of incentives such that you would have to be a very bad person indeed not to see the wisdom of being a peaceful, honest collaborator with the next person you meet, right? Given the nature of the system. Whereas, I mean, just to sharpen this up because that can sound very abstract, if you take an actually normal, decent person who just wants to be good and have positive sum relationships with everyone he meets, you put that person in a maximum security prison in the United States, that person will be highly incentivized to join a gang that has the requisite color of his skin, right, and be essentially a monster, because that's the only way to survive in that context, right? To not join a gang, to not join a racist gang, is to be the victim of everyone, right? So what you have in a maximum security prison is a system of terrible incentives where you have to be some kind of self-sacrificing saint to opt out of ramifying this awful system of incentives further. We want the opposite of that in situations that we control and in institutions that we build. And the thing that's so disturbing to me about this contrarian moment is that so many people have gotten the message, and this is really most explicit since COVID, they've gotten the message that we don't need institutions. We don't want institutions. We just need to burn it all down. And we're just going to navigate by Substack newsletter and podcast. And that's just not going to work, right? We can't be all contrarian all the time. We need institutional knowledge.
Intermediary institutions.
Yeah, that work. Yeah, so whether we have to build new ones or perform exorcisms on our old ones, that might be a different answer depending on the case. But there's no question we need institutions that are better than most individuals and that make most individuals live up to norms that they themselves didn't invent and would, under another system of incentives, would struggle to emulate.
All right, I'm going to bring it in to land, Sam. I think what we're going to do on the Daily Wire side, I want to talk to you, I think, for half an hour about the anti-Semitic landscape on the left and the right. And I want to go down those rabbit holes and explore them with you. So that's, for everybody watching and listening, I think that's what we're going to do on the Daily Wire side. And because you made some comments earlier about your concerns about the right-wing parties in Europe, for example, and the Nazis that are hiding there. And I've seen no shortage of right-wing anti-Semitism rear its ugly head, let's say, on X, for example. But I also want to talk to you about the same pathology emerging on the left, because there's no shortage of unbelievable anti-Semitism on the left. And we should sort that out a little bit. And so that's what we'll do on the Daily Wire side. Sam, every time we talk, I think we get a little bit, we understand each other a little bit better. I think there's something very fruitful for us to continue discussing in relationship, to a number of the things you discussed today about the necessity for intermediary institutions. That's the principle of subsidiarity. It's an ancient principle of Catholic social, social philosophy. You have to have intermediary institutions. They're the alternative to tyranny and slavery. The idea that there's a harmony between individual development and proper institutions that has to be established. You can't be it's very difficult to be a good person in an entirely pathological social situation. And then this idea that there's a hierarchy of games, because part of what got me interested to begin with in the religious world, let's say, was because I started to understand what constituted the religious as the...
You think Jordan Peterson's going to talk to you again? No, I think they were happy with the views we got initially, but I think he got ass pain because he was only being challenged. Because I think it was like a month or two later, he was on some other show and he was like, that Destiny character, he just wants to be right all the time. Because I gave him the lightest fucking pushback on his show. None of these guys just want to be challenged very much. They just want to circle jerk in their echo chambers all day and then just say the most just pointless, empty drivel for hours.
Structure of the depth of games. It's by definition. I'm not talking about what people think about as superstitious belief. That's not the issue. The issue is that there's a hierarchy of game, from shallow to deep, from counterproductive to productive, from unplayable to iterative. and that's a real world. And there's a reason for that I think is allied with your desire, lifelong desire, to investigate the objective grounds of the moral world.
Yeah, I mean,
there's
one thing I would
convergence
add to that is that also by definition on my account, whatever's true there, whatever's truly
That clip spread around a bit, and he was mad as fuck. Wait, which clip?
sacred, the true spiritual possibility has to be deeper than culture, and it certainly has to be deeper than the accidents of ancient cultures being separated from one another based on linguistic and geographical barriers, right? So it can't be
no dispute about that.
Yeah, it can't be that Eastern Orthodox Christianity is the real answer versus Hinduism being the real answer. Because I mean, one, they're incompatible answers at the surface level. Whatever deep truth they may be in touch with, that is something we have to understand in a 21st century context that is deeper than provincialism. That's my argument against religious sectarianism of any kind.
We definitely have much to discuss the next time we talk. All right, so for everybody watching and listening, join us on the Daily Wire side, because we'll go down the anti-Semitic rabbit hole, and that'll give Sam and I a little bit of time as well to discuss the political, which we haven't, which we've conveniently circumvented in a sense, but we had other things to talk about. So join us there. Thank you to the film crew here today in Scottsdale. Thanks, Sam. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah,
I'm glad you're doing well. It's real good to see you, man. Yep.
Even the fucking music, dude. Jesus. Destiny, Jordan, Trust Car. Oh, I asked him, how do you establish Jordan Peterson shocks Destiny during debate. Which one is it?
Analysts to have
Horrible conversation. Oh my God. Goddamn vaccines.
goddamn vaccines.
Like the ones that they did do for the vaccines, and they continue to do to this day. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
You really think that you're in a position to evaluate the scientific credibility of the trials for the vaccines, do you?
No,
Really?
I don't. So I have to trust.
Then what are you doing? I don't trust that. I look at the bloody data.
First of all, you have to trust third parties to some extent. When you go outside,
I don't have to trust
Of course you do. You do every day. When you turn the keys in your car, you hope your engine doesn't explode. When you're drinking water, you hope that the public water or whatever tap or bottled water you got it out of isn't contaminated or poisoned with cholera.
I don't
when
do
you
that as a consequence of consensus.
No, of course you do.
No, I don't. I do that as a consequence of observing multiple times that when I put the goddamn key in the ignition, the truck started.
Why do you know it's going to start the 50th or the 100th time? How many times do you wear
with me?
I'm
You know
not
perfectly
playing
well
Hume.
why.
You don't know if the denim in those jeans isn't leaking into your bloodstream. To some extent, we trust.
Like these, it's not even a smart. It's just a stupid. I don't even want to call it contrary. It's just stupid. It's just stupid. Also, my response there was stupid. I shouldn't have said, "How do you know it's not going to explode the 50th or the 100th time?" I should have asked. That's a fine question, actually. I should have said, "How do you know it's not going to explode the first time?" Right? Yes, but it's such a stupid back and forth. This whole conversation was so stupid.
Observing multiple times that when I put the goddamn key in the ignition, the truck started.
Why do you know it's going to start the 50th or the 100th time? How many times do you
play
wear
Hume with me?
I'm
You know
not
perfectly
playing
well
Hume.
why.
You don't know if the denim in those jeans isn't leaking into your bloodstream. To some extent, we have to trust third-party institutions.
Except when they use force. How about that?
Like, it's such a like, how do you not, what do you even say? In every society, we verify and validate every single thing that we interact. It's such a, on its face, stupid, I don't care. Okay. Destiny Jordan. Oh, my rap album. Watch the shock Destiny? Oh, what am I shocked about?
Because the leftists should have been the ones that were most skeptical about the bloody pharmaceutical companies. And they jumped on the vaccine bandwagon in exactly the same way that you're doing right.
It's from, why is anything else our channel posting that clip?
Pharmaceutical
companies have helped us tremendously.
Yeah, right, there we go, fine. No,
Like,
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
You're just wrong.
I think they're
You're
utterly
wrong.
I see. So you don't think that the pharmaceutical companies who dominate the advertising landscape with 75% of the funding are corrupt?
Corrupt is a very broad.
No, it's
do you think that
corrupt with a tinge of malevolence, willing to extract money out of people by putting their health on the line. You don't believe that?
Do you think that we get effective drugs from pharmaceutical companies?
Not particularly.
Okay. Damn it. Why did I ask that question? You know what he's going to say. You know he's going to say some retarded shit. Dipshit, dumbass. Imagine asking a question to further a conversation, expecting he would engage in good faith. Meanwhile, all of these conservative guys are fucking downing handfuls of Viagra, TRT, and Ozempic now that they've found pills that they like. Good one. What? Now you gotta watch this fish meme. The fish meme. It's a vaccine. There are different technologies.
Fine.
The mRNA vaccines, like
this used to
vaccine
be
technology.
vaccines. Now this is vaccines.
No, it was like this and now it's like this.
No, it was like this and now it's like this. The mRNA technology was a radical qualitative leap forward in technology. You can call it a vaccine if you want to, but it bears very little resemblance to any vaccine that went before that. And the reason it was called a vaccine was because vaccine was a brand name that had a track record of safety, and shoehorning it in that was one of the ways to make sure that people weren't terrified of the technology. And
the reason vaccines they're objecting to something that's inoculating you against something in the future because there's proteins that resemble virus that
there are
infect your
overlaps
immune system.
between the mRNA technologies and vaccines, to be sure, but they wouldn't have been put forward with the rate that they were put forward if they weren't a radical new technology. And it's bad in principle to inject billions of people with an untested new technology.
Is it also bad in principle for billions of people to get infected with a worldwide pandemic that initially was causing a decent number of deaths, a ton of complications, shutting down world economies?
Maybe it was. Maybe.
What? Maybe? What do you mean maybe? Like, think of, like, this is, just in case you wonder why I hate Jordan Peterson, it's the selective skepticism and the selective explosion of, like, exploding out concepts where you ask, you ask Jordan Peterson, was Jesus really resurrected in 3 days? I was like, well, what does it mean when we say resurrected? And who would have observed it? And then it's like, was Hunter Biden actually corrupt? Yes! They were corrupt and evil. And they did X, Y, Z, and VAERS, and the pharmaceuticals light. It's like, oh, okay. Like, he's very willing to make concrete, discrete claims about things when it's politically suitable. But then when it comes to something you have to challenge a little bit, now it's like, well, I don't know, right? Like, obviously the vaccines were bad. Don't you think, like, COVID was bad? I don't know. Maybe. Really? For billions of people to get infected. And also, we came out of this conversation with him saying, I'm the one who just wants to win the argument. You won't even admit that, like, having a disease is bad.
Technology, and it's bad in principle to inject billions of people with an untested new technology.
Is it also bad in principle for billions of people to get infected with a worldwide pandemic that initially was causing a decent number of deaths, a ton of complications, shutting down world economies?
Maybe it was.
So should we engage in that analysis and figure out, like, if we look at
we're not engaging in the analysis.
No, because now we're talking about vaccines or even vaccines or not.
No, don't play that game. That's not what I was doing. I was making a very specific and careful case. The mRNA technology, by wide recognition, is an extraordinarily novel technology.
But that's not a vaccine, though.
Well, okay, it's a radically transformed form of vaccine. I don't give a damn. That still makes it something so new that the potential danger of its mass administration was highly probable to be at least or more dangerous than the thing that it was.
Highly probable to be at least or more dangerous than what is this form of analysis from a guy who just told me that we weren't qualified to even question vaccine research or whatever? Like, okay, I'm done. I don't care. God, I hate it. Okay.